do I have?
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Kentucky to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama, this is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller is out today, but we're still bringing you the show. On the program, Dan Osborn, the independent labor candidate for U.S. Senate in Nebraska that almost defeated the Republican incumbent, joins to talk about lessons learned from the campaign. Canada's Liberal government continues its strike-breaking spree. All that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, we've got a phone number and the line is open. You can give us a call at 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. You can also leave us a voicemail throughout the week and we might respond to it on the next program. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, TVLR.fm. But we are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program or make a one-time donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. We've got a bunch of cool merch for sale at tvlr.fm/store. We still have our logo dad cap. We've got some of our unionized tees that are still available for pre-order, union-made matchbooks, all that good stuff. And also, folks, we are now in the middle of a fundraising campaign. We launched it last week on Tuesday. We have a goal of $10,000. And we launched it earlier in the year, but we did not get off to a great start, and so we kind of fizzled it out, and then we're resurrecting it. So it's kind of the same campaign. We didn't meet our goal last time, so we're trying to get the rest of the way to the goal this time. We'll talk some more about the fundraising campaign later in the show, but you can check it out right now at tvlr.fm/union 2024. And finally, folks, if you're a member of a union, then please do think about getting your local or international to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details on that. And since Adam is not in the office, in the studio today, I will add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Internet Radio, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WMMT, or through your favorite podcasting app. We're proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, and we encourage our listeners to check that out. As most of you know, we're not media professionals, just a few diehard unionists who want to amplify the voices of the working class in the American South. We're hoping that this project can make a difference on that front, and we couldn't do it without you. So we want to thank everybody for tuning in, whether you are a loyal fan or a first-time listener. We appreciate you spending some time with us. And with that, let's jump right into last week in Southern labor. Here's what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to from November 8th to the 15th. In new union campaigns, 7 workers at Science Applications International Corporation, SAIC, in Fort Worth, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAMAW. 10 workers at ASJ IT Services in Augusta, Georgia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Union of Electrical Workers, IUECWA. Workers likely pushed by their employer and with support from the National Right to Work Foundation Foundation filed a petition to decertify the United Steelworkers, USW, as the union representing 120 workers at Conco, an ammunition manufacturing company in Louisville, Kentucky. 18 workers at Starbucks in Benton, Arkansas filed a petition to hold a union election with Starbucks Workers United. 50 workers at Intellect Techs in Augusta, Georgia filed a petition to hold a union election with IUE CWA. 3 workers at Wesco Distribution in Maryland Heights, Missouri filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW Local 1. 26 workers at Volunteer Ministry Center in Knoxville, Tennessee filed a petition to hold a union election with Service Employees International Union, SEIU Local 205. And 37 workers at HCL Mechanical Services in Houston, Texas filed a petition to hold a union election with the Sheet Metal, Air, Rail, and Transportation Workers Union, SMART, Local 54. In election results, 9 workers at St. Regis Hotel in Washington, D.C. withdrew their petition for a union election with the International Union of Operating Engineers, IUOE Local 99. 3 workers at SAIC in Dallas, Texas voted 3-0 in favor of unionization with the IAMAW. 297 workers at Siemens in Fort Worth, Texas voted 197-29 in favor of unionization with the IBEW Local 220. 39 workers at Kloekner Metals Corporation in Charlotte, North Carolina voted 18-19 against unionization with the USW. 35 workers at United Plumbing Company in Goshen, Kentucky voted 19-14 in favor of unionization with the United Association of Plumbers and Pipefitters, UA Local 502. 51 workers at Windstream Services in Sugar Land, Texas voted 28-11 in favor of unionization with the Communication Workers of America, CWA. 6 workers at Bile Brothers in Jonesboro, Georgia voted 3-3 in a union election, and ties go to the employers, so they are not unionizing with IUOE Local 926. In strikes and bargaining updates, 17 Darling Ingredients drivers in Grapeland, Texas, unionized with the Teamsters Local 754, voted unanimously to authorize a strike if the company does not negotiate a fair contract. Teamster pilots at Allegiant Airlines voted 97.4% to authorize a strike nationwide if the company doesn't agree to a fair contract. Nurses at the Atlanta VA unionized with the National Nurses United rallied outside their facility to draw attention to the budget crisis at the VA and the effects it is having on workers and patients, like short staffing, nurse retention, and low morale. The Monongalia County Commission in West Virginia announced that it does not and will not recognize the United Mine Workers of America, UMWA, as the representative of its employees, despite the fact that the employees voted to unionize with the UMWA. The Smart Transportation Department, Local 584, ratified a new 5-year agreement with the Alabama and Gulf Coast Railway, a subsidiary of Genesee and Wyoming, which spans 292 miles from Pensacola, Florida to Columbus, Mississippi. The agreement provides a 16.4% raise in pay in the first year, with further increases each year, which compounds to 33.5% over the 5-year agreement. Labor Notes has a report on the letter carriers' campaign to vote down the recent tentative agreement between their union and the post office. In political and legislative updates, the National Labor Relations Board ruled that captive audience meetings are illegal last week in a case against Amazon, in a decision that, if it is not overturned by the courts, will likely be overturned by a Trump NLRB. This reversal can potentially be postponed, though, if Senate Democrats will reconfirm Lauren McFerrin when her term is up in December, which would maintain a 2-1 Democratic majority on the NLRB until 2026. Unions and the AFL-CIO applauded the decision. The NLRB made another impactful decision last week, further expanding what can be considered a threat from employers during a union campaign, clarifying that when an employer is making, quote, predictions about what will happen in the event that their employees unionize, these predictions, quote, must be carefully phrased on the basis of objective fact to convey an employer's belief as to demonstrably probable consequences beyond its control. The NLRB further explained that if such a prediction is not grounded in objective facts or predicts negative consequences that would result from the employer's own action, it is, quote, no longer a reasonable prediction based on available facts, but a threat of retaliation based on misrepresentation and coercion. The American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE, the largest federal employee union in the United States, is sounding the alarm about the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, stating that, quote, millions of Americans should brace for massive cuts to benefits and services they rely on for their survival under plans to target government spending and operations. The union further said, quote, to really attack government waste, the administration should target private contractors who are price gouging American taxpayers to deliver poorer service at higher cost while their corporate profits and executive pay skyrocket. Unions representing approximately half of American union members have reiterated their calls for an arms embargo against Israel, and Bernie Sanders has announced his intentions to file resolutions to block $20 billion in offensive aid to the country. The United States House of Representatives passed the Social Security Fairness Act, which repeals provisions of the law that cut or eliminate Social Security benefits for many government workers. Now it needs to pass the Senate. Unions, particularly ones representing government workers, applauded the move. In internal union affairs, National Nurses United, through its project with the California Nurses Foundation, the Registered Nurse Response Network, highlighted the nurses it deployed to Asheville, North Carolina in a recent post on their website. That is it for our roundup this week. I know that I missed some stuff. I was not able to include everything that I had compiled over the last week. I will be adding those over the weekend. So if you would like to see the full Last Week in Southern Labor, then you need to check out our website, TVLR.fm, on Tuesday, which is going to be when we drop Last Week in Southern Labor. So make sure you do that. We're going to head to a break. We're going to be right back with Dan Osborn. Dan Osborn, independent candidate for U.S. Senate in Nebraska. The election just concluded, almost defeating the Republican incumbent Deb Fischer. Really excited for this conversation. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
Benefit Architects has proudly supported union members and union-made products for over 35 years. If you are a federal employee and an AFGE member, you're eligible for hundreds of dollars in money-saving benefits, including group life insurance, dental insurance, and AFLAC insurance. Additionally, if you're a union member but don't work for the federal government, you can still qualify for several of these money-saving policies. So give Tate Hure a call at 256-215-6769 for details and to enroll. Again, that is Tate Hure at 256-215-6769.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and family members are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough even to keep their jobs. We can fix this. It's time for us to find a way to close the health care coverage gap so that people can remain at work. Let's make this a priority. Let's close this gap and cover Alabama. To learn more and how you can help, visit coveralabama.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Folks, labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor. You are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host Adam Keller is out of studio today. He's got to work. Isn't that lame? Some of us have to work. If you've got anything to add, you can give us a call or leave us a voicemail throughout the week. But if you'd like to give us a call, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We've got some 30-something people watching us on the YouTube, almost 40, but not that many people have liked the stream yet. If you haven't liked the stream, please go ahead and do that. We have a listener from Canada, and interested in what she has to say about that, because our international story this week that we're going to give to you in a quick hit is from Canada. And that is that the Canadian Liberal government is continuing its strike-breaking streak, with last week the Labour Minister Stephen McCannon again using his power to force an end to a strike, this time against dock workers. Workers on the ports of Vancouver and Prince Rupert had been out on strike since early this month, and dock workers in Montreal were locked out by their employers beginning on Monday. The issues at play are familiar ones: automation and work-life balance and wages. At least one of the ports, the companies were offering only a 20% raise over the next 6 years. The government capitulated under significant business pressure to end the strike. With this being the busiest season for the ports, these business entities were lambasting the government for not intervening sooner, and after the intervention saying they were, quote, pleased with the action, however late they perceived it to be. Meanwhile, these actions threatened the government's standing with unions, with the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, one of the affected unions, saying that they will, quote, not forget how this government has attacked labor. Because remember, it's not just the ports. Only a few months ago, the same labor minister did the same thing to rail workers. Both rail and port workers saw their struggles sent to binding and final federal arbitration. It's unclear right now what the outcome will be from the arbitration, and at least the dock workers, I think the rail workers are too, but the dock workers have announced that they are challenging the decision and saying that it's not appropriate. It's difficult to see how these actions against workers will help the beleaguered liberal government, which has been continuously losing support and looks to be in an increasingly weak position against the Canadian Conservative Party ahead of next year's elections. All right, folks, so there you go. There's your international update. Back to the States. Dan Osborn is a union steam fitter in Nebraska. He's not in the Zoom. Okay, let's see. Okay, sorry about that. So while we wait for Dan Osborn, going to check out the chat. Like I mentioned, we do have a listener, Quirky Geek Girl from Canada, mentioned that not only have there been labor disputes on the ports, apparently Canada Post went on strike yesterday. saying that she also said, I'm concerned about the Canadian federal election next year. The current government has been pretty bad with Labor, but the Conservatives will be so much worse. The only difference between the Conservatives up here and MAGA in the United States is that the Conservatives in Canada do not say the quiet part out loud and are disciplined on dismantling progress about climate change. I'm hoping that the Liberals will let negotiations go on and not do back-to-work legislation. It was bad for them when they did it to the rail workers. It almost forced an early election, supposedly. Wow, that's interesting. And then saying that she missed the story about the dock workers. Man, they suck. Yeah, indeed. Very big bummer. Very big bummer about what they did to the dock workers. It's difficult to understand exactly what the upshot of this is going to be, right? Because they're continuing in Canada to lose ground against the Conservative Party, and so they need to be able to shore up their support with their base among unions. And so attacking unions, sending them back to work when they went on strike, just really does not seem like the move. It's difficult to understand where they are, where they're coming from with these decisions. But, I don't know. Difficult to figure out what the moves are there. Dan still not in the Zoom yet? Okay. Alrighty. So let's see. Ready when you are. Let's I know that we just got back from a break. But let's talk about the fundraiser while we wait for Dan to join us. I mentioned when we started the program that we've got a fundraiser. We're trying to raise $10,000 to maintain our operations. And Adam, like I said, Adam is not in studio with us, but he left us a voicemail on his way into work this morning about the fundraiser and about our project at the Valley Labor Report. So let's go ahead and play this voicemail from Adam.
Hey, y'all, this is Adam Keller. Sorry I couldn't be in studio with you today, but I've got to work and be with my IIC 900 siblings so I can try to pay my bills. But I wanted to call in and express my gratitude to all of you who have donated to the fall fundraiser, all of you who contribute monthly or otherwise, all of you who sponsor the show. We could not do it without you. We really couldn't. We don't have billionaires and hedge funds to back us up. We just have everyday working folks like you. And your support really does matter. It means a lot. It goes a long way. And I'm really proud of what we've been able to accomplish with this project. It started back in 2020, and I joined in 2021 just in time for the Strike Fest fundraiser. And we were able to do a long live stream marathon online, combine that with an in-person concert at Brookwood to raise over $75,000 for striking coal miners fighting against Warrior Met Coal. And that was a great introduction to this project for me because it really showed me the power of this community and the power that this project can bring to our movement, right? It's not just content that we put online or on the radio. We can really connect folks, and we can educate folks and inspire folks, and we can even make a real-life impact. And so I would encourage all of you listening, if this show has made a difference, if this show has inspired you or educated you in some way, please give us a call. Leave us a voicemail. Call in live. Let us know what this project means to you. We would love to hear that. And I appreciate everyone, whether you contribute financially or you just share, listen, like, subscribe, give us reviews. All that stuff really does make a difference. And, we have grown tremendously. We went from one radio station, WBNN, the conservative talk station in Huntsville. We're now on 4 radio stations across 3 states. Our online audience has continued to grow. We have over 11,000 subscribers on YouTube now. We have podcasts. We have Facebook. We release clips throughout the week on our YouTube channel. And, I'm just really proud that we have grown this content, grown this project. And that's because of you, folks who listen, folks who give us their feedback and engage with this. So thank you for all your support. Please get us over the finish line for this fall fundraiser so we can not only sustain this project, but grow and reach more people, do better work, and get this message of solidarity, collective organization, and people power out there across the South and across the world. Thanks again for your support. Solidarity forever, y'all.
Yep. And so let's go to our fundraiser page and take a look at it. TVLR.fm/Union2024 is the URL. You can check it out there. The logo at the top of the page is, we got to update that. It's like 6 days remaining. It's going to end on November 23rd, which is Saturday next week, right? I'm pretty sure that's when it is. So we're about 30% of the way to the goal, which is really exciting after having only having launched the fundraiser like something like 4 or 5 days ago. So we're getting close to being there. We have a whole week left. And I wanted to call your attention to the prizes that we've got, or to the gifts that we've got for donating. I think they're really, really cool. So if you donate just $25, you'll get 2 union-made matchbooks that say "Fire Your Boss," which is really cool. I think I'm really excited to get those. I do not smoke anymore, but I might have to go get a cigar just so that I can utilize these extremely cool matches. But also, if you've got like candles around the house and stuff like that, or you're going to make a campfire or something like that, these will be really cool matches to have. Donate $75 and you'll get those matchbooks, plus your name will be mentioned on the stream next week. If you donate $150, you'll get 2 matchbooks, your name mentioned on the stream, a free unionized t-shirt that looks kind of like the Supreme logo. And if you donate $250, you'll get 2 matchbooks, your name mentioned on the stream, a free unionized t-shirt, a TVLR sticker, and our logo cap. So that's really cool. And then the big prize, if we hit our stretch goal of $15,000, then we will travel and do a live show in the city with the largest number of individuals donating. So wherever that is, we will go there. If it's within the United States, I don't think that we're going to be doing international travel. I don't think that's a worry, but I just want to make that caveat so that in case somebody gets like 100 of their friends to donate in, Bolivia or something, then we're not going to be able to go to Bolivia. I would love to go to Bolivia, but don't think we're going to be able to make that happen. So if we hit $15,000, we're going to do a live show in the city with the largest number of individuals donating, and I think that would be a lot of fun. So if you think that would be fun, then check it out. Make sure you donate, get those prizes, and help us stay on the show. Somebody mentioned in the chat, donate so that Adam can get a day off. Indeed, you should, and that will be one of the things that we will be funding. Adam and I have been volunteer basically for the entire run of this project. There was like 6 or 7 months where we paid Adam a little bit. But I've been volunteer the entire time. And so one of the things that we want to do with this $10,000 is get Adam some money. We're going to pay him for the labor that he does, just like we pay the rest of the people who make this show work, the folks like our behind the scenes post-production audio and video folks. We pay everybody besides Adam and myself at least $21 an hour, so we want to extend that to Adam as well. I will maintain my volunteer status because my job, the job that I have outside of this, is relatively high paying, and I don't feel like I need to take money from this project at this time, at least. So that's going to be one of the things that we want to do with this project, in addition to just kind of maintaining our current operations. We also want to expand our radio presence. The next city that we have in our sights is Chattanooga because of the UAW election win at Volkswagen there. And we have connections at a radio station in Chattanooga, so that is going to be one of our next stops, is expanding to Chattanooga. So there you go, tvlr.fm/union2024. Subscribe to our newsletters so that you can get updates about this at tvlr.fm, and donate and get those really cool prizes. So there you go. All right. I do think that we now have Dan Osborn in the chat, or in the Zoom. Dan Osborn is a union steam fitter in Nebraska. He worked for Kellogg's for a long time prior to that and led a strike at the Omaha facility with BCTGM Local 50G in 2021, where they won a significant contract. You all know him, however, because he ran a historic campaign for U.S. Senate in his state as an independent and came pretty close to ousting longtime incumbent Republican Deb Fischer, with the final result being 53-46. Dan is back on the show now to talk about the campaign, lessons learned, and next steps. So, Dan Osborn, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Close only counts in horseshoes, hand grenades, and apparently politics now too.
Yes. Well, that's true, right? Like, because you didn't win, you're not going to be in office, and so like you're not going to have that power. But I do think that there really is something to being so close, especially as an independent, especially in a state as, kind of quote unquote ruby red as Nebraska is. And so that's why we wanted to talk, because I think that there are some things that people across the country who want to see more worker-focused politics and a more, worker-friendly government can learn from what you were able to do in Nebraska. And so before we talk about some of the lessons maybe that you learned and that you think folks can take away from your campaign, I'm curious, why did you decide to run initially? And then why did you decide to run as an independent?
Well, I'll answer the independent piece first because I've always been a registered independent from the time I could vote. I've never been able to put myself in a tiny little box, I suppose, as far as a red or blue box goes. But I haven't always been a political person. It wasn't until the strike at Kellogg's. For 20 years, I did nothing but pay my dues, work my way up in the union, clock in and fix machines every day, 8 to 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. But it wasn't until COVID, really, I suppose, would be the origin story. During COVID, we were working, there's 4 plants under the master contract, the umbrella of the master contract, and we were all working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, that whole entire year with no time off, as deemed essential workers by the government. So, they made at one point in time, 50% of our workforce was forced quarantine and or sick. Wow. But they made record profits. They went from $19 billion to $21 billion. The CEO gave himself a $2 million raise. The board enriched themselves. The stockholders enriched themselves. And then our contract expired. For me as president, I figured it'd be a no-brainer that we were going to get a little sliver of the pie. But instead, they tried to take our health insurance. They tried to take our COLA, cost of living adjustment. They tried to implement a 2-tier wage system with no path for a lower-tier employee to go to the upper tier. So, that was my old crap moment. There hadn't been a strike in Nebraska since 1972. So I had to learn what it all meant. And I figured it out. We kind of built the plane as we were flying it, similar to my campaign. But I knew Democrats were going to come out and support on the picket line because that's traditionally what they do. But that's not the way I see my world, Jacob. I didn't see black or white or men or women or Republican or Democrat on the picket line. I just saw people that wanted to go to work for a fair wage, decent benefits for the time that they trade in service of the company. So I set out to make it a nonpartisan issue. I was able to get a Republican House congressman out to the picket line. I was able to get our governor, now U.S. Senator Pete Riggets, to draft a letter and send it to the CEO, Steve Cahillane, imploring him to get our people back to work. So I was pretty effective in making it just a worker issue and not a partisan issue. And, so fast forward to, last year in October, we announced my candidacy running as an independent, and really just a lot of it was labor focused. It was worker focused. And I just realized how much corporations influence our elections in this country. We could talk about voter boxes and Russian meddling all day long, but truly it's the corporations that influence our elections, and that's what I set out to change. We came dang close, but I think I'm hoping what we created here in Nebraska is a spark that's going to light a fire nationally. I mean, a lot of people around the country took notice, and I think a lot of people are going to try to repeat what we did here.
Why did you choose the U.S. Senate to run? That is a pretty high office, and I mean, it obviously, you came really, really close and ran one of the most interesting and engaging, I think, campaigns for people who care about workers more than they care about Democrats or Republicans, right? I was more interested and engaged with your campaign than I was in any other campaign really across the country, frankly. But I have union members now that are talking to me about being interested in running for office potentially in 2026 somewhere, and they're kind of considering what office to go for, and I'm kind of nervous about them going for higher office because I feel I worry about encouraging them to take on a task that large. And so were you really confident when you made the decision to run for U.S. Senate? Like you already knew you had a base, or is this something that what was that decision-making process to run for U.S. Senate as opposed to maybe a lower office?
It really started with the railroaders out in North Platte. North Platte, Nebraska is the biggest rail yard in the world. And they were upset with Senator Fischer, my opponent, with her stance on rail. I mean, they have pictures of her getting off of corporate jets. Like, there's a U.S. senator shouldn't be getting off a UP corporate jet at any point in time. But she would consistently vote down the Rail Safety Act. She headed the transportation committee that allows railroads to police their own safety, and now they have death factored in as acceptable in a safety program. So that's who she is. So this really started with them, and they recruited me via the beautiful World Wide Web. I haven't had political aspirations, but they saw somebody in Deb Fischer who really just doesn't do anything, and quite frankly, the fact that she still won blows me away, because she's a extremely ineffective senator, but she's got an R next to her name in a very, very red state, and she basically beat me off of lies. She made up things about my stance on immigration and everything else, and people just bought it, I suppose, at the end of the day. But we saw a weak incumbent, and that's why we chose that office to go for. And that's where I wanted to make the most impact too. That's where I would have been the only one in the U.S. Senate with a union card in my wallet, and that means something to me. And
yeah.
And I feel like just because we came so close, within inches, it just shows me people are ready. People are thirsty for a change, something different, and especially for workers to actually have a seat at the table finally.
Right. And so, what do you think some of the things that you learned, what are some of the things that you learned about the political process, about running for office, about running an effective campaign? What are some of the things that you feel like you learned during the campaign that maybe other folks don't know that they should?
Well, I think, we all hear about the corruption and how ridiculous it is, and that's all true. You can get on TV and say anything about anybody. There's no referees. There's nobody to call out the BS when people lie about you. It puts your family through the ringer. but it's, but we can't stop fighting. But also what I learned, I did over 180 publicly advertised events. I did rooms sometimes with 5 people and sometimes with 300 people. But what I learned, and especially running as an independent, I would get both sides to my meetings, or my town halls, I suppose you could call them. And people would shuffle in, and I was in Columbus, Nebraska recently. I had about 80 people there, and half the people, people naturally segregate themselves. And I had the MAGA crowd on the right, and I had Harrison Walls on the left. And I gave my normal speech, and I said, look, I can see there's a division right here in this room. But here's the thing. We're all friends here. We're all neighbors here. We all, we live in the same town, and we all understand what the issues are. Let's focus on the issues and how to resolve them. And, Republicans aren't the enemy. Democrats aren't the enemy here. We have to talk about who's dividing us and why. And, after I said that, and then we focused on issues, there was no squabbling. Everybody was nodding their heads together. And so that's what I learned is we're not as divided once we start talking about the issues as the media lets us on to believe.
Right. How supportive was labor during the campaign? It sounds like labor was kind of a big part of you kind of getting involved in the campaign initially. So what did that look like throughout the campaign?
Yeah, it was a little difficult at first, because this was just like anything, just like Bill Gates starting out a company out of his garage. It was a complete startup from just an idea. And at first, labor was, just as difficult as anybody to convince. But as it went on and we started to put in the work and we started to fundraise, and our digital fundraising took off, and they started to see, this guy's raising money, and he's getting out and talking to people. And then the first poll came out of the race that essentially had us within the margin of error, essentially tied with Fischer. Then everything started, all the chips started to fall in line, and labor was like, oh crap, we got one of our own guys running here, and this is a real thing. It took some convincing for people to understand that this is real and possible. And then once that became known, labor was very influential. Going to DC and talking to all the internationals and the nationals and the presidents and the political people. Everybody wanted to jump in and help. And Sean Fain came to Omaha and did a rally with me in Omaha and Lincoln. And I look forward to working with him in the future to see how we can get other, you mentioned other labor people running for offices. They all certainly don't have to be U.S. Senate. So we're starting a PAC called Working Class Heroes PAC. Where I'm pretty good at fundraising, so we're gonna raise some money for that, and we're gonna help people get elected. So if you know anybody that's getting elected, you let me know, and hopefully I can donate to their campaign and help them get started too.
All right. Yeah, we'll definitely, once these, 2026 is a little ways off, but, you need to start up these things pretty early. So once we're getting close to any final decisions with these union members in Alabama that are reaching out to me about running as an independent, I'll definitely be reaching out to you and making those connections. You mentioned that you were able to raise money. Talk us through that. I think as people who are, who are workers who care about, getting pro-worker politicians elected, obviously you're not going to be able to go to somebody like a Bill Gates and get millions of dollars spent on your behalf in a super PAC, right? You have to raise money from like workers and our organization. So how did that work?
Yeah, our average, we raised over $14 million after everything was said and done, and our average donation was $40. I had 2 volunteers in my office just opening envelopes with checks, $10, $20, $30, $40, with letters of encouragement. And, that was our biggest donation, because we wanted to be different. We, I feel like, my opponent 4 of her top 11 donors are Class 1 railroads, and that's why she was so bad with workers on rail. She always sided with the corporations. She takes money from the meat packers in the state and does their bidding. So, that's why, these corporations are so influential in government, is they're the people who can afford to buy senators. You and I certainly can't.
Right.
So I didn't want to take their money. I didn't take any corporate PAC money. And, it was just all hustle. It was just all going on trips and going to the Independent National Convention in Denver. And it really wasn't until we got an article in the New York Times that helped boost us initially. So, it was all stepping stones on the ladder. Each time we got a USA Today article or a New York Times article, then our fundraising took off. And but yeah, mostly it was just sheer hustle and elbow grease.
How do you manage maintaining a base of support with different ideologies? That was something that I thought was interesting when I saw interviews with people that were supporting your campaign or articles about it. There were Republicans supporting you. There were Democrats supporting you. There were people on the left, like capital L left. There were people on the capital R right. There were libertarians, Greens, independents. Yeah, and that's like a lot of those people are really, really, have really different ideas about how to make the country better. So how do you manage maintaining that kind of coalition that might seem unwieldy to some?
Yeah, it's this is going to sound cheesy and cliche, but it's not red and blue for me. It's red, white, and blue. Just like my event in Columbus that I was talking about. It's you would drive around the state and you would see Osborn sign next to Trump signs, and literally across the street you'd see an Osborn sign next to a Harris sign. So if nothing else, I brought neighbors together because that's what I'm passionate about doing. I served in the United States Navy and the Nebraska Army National Guard. It's because I love this country, and I hate to see it seemingly being ripped apart. Not one side's to blame. Like I said, it's this division that's been created, and I think the division that's it's a story as old as time. Mao Zedong, The Art of War. You divide, you conquer. You got to ask yourself who's doing the dividing here, right? And it's the, I think the common enemy here is for the 55 multinational corporations that funnel their profits overseas, park it there, don't repatriate it back to the United States, and they don't pay any taxes. Yeah. And, and the Jeff Bezos and the Elon Musks of the world that are anti-union and, they don't want their workers to get a fair shake. Those are the ones who are benefiting from having us fight over transgender bathrooms or the Second Amendment. They'll have us fight over anything. It doesn't matter. And instead of being focused on workers' issues and healthcare for people and the environment, the real issues that we should be talking about. So for me, bringing everybody together was fairly easy because we just focused on issues and not party politics.
Right. Yeah. They'll have us fight over anything that doesn't affect their bottom line, right? There's a reason that and this is with both parties, right? There's a reason that it is so easy for Democrats to defend like transgender social issues, right? And that's because it doesn't affect the bottom dollar of any of their donors, right? And there's a reason that it's so easy that Republicans want to stoke this issue socially because it doesn't affect their bottom line. We're not actually talking about increasing the quality of life. When we're talking about these kinds of things, we're not actually talking about increasing the material, the quality of the material conditions that working people live under. We're not talking about taking some of the money that we create as workers from the people at the top of these corporations who are stealing it from us, right? And so there's a reason that these social issues are what both parties really want to focus on, rather than, some of those things that you were talking about that you really focused your campaign on. And so what were like the top 3 things, like your elevator pitch, when you went and talked to people, what were those things that you said
that you were going to be working on?
Certainly, yeah, that's a good question, and certainly we don't see. I didn't hear a whole lot in presidential or vice presidential debate on what anybody's actual plan is to increase the national debt. Every single child that's born into this country is born with $100,000 in debt. That's unacceptable, and it's unsustainable. As a country, we can't continue to do this. We have to get our manufacturing back into this country to create more jobs, and we did a pretty good job of that with the CHIP Act. But it's about bringing our jobs back here, keeping them here, incentivizing them to be here, and tariffs. We'll see, but I don't think they're going to work, because typically the tariff always comes back to the consumer, because the CEO is certainly always going to get theirs, and it usually always comes back to the consumer, and the farmers and ranchers get hurt. So we'll see what these tariffs do, if anything. But it's government spending. For example, over 60% of our budget in this country is the Department of Defense. And I'm not suggesting we cut military spending at a time, in a very tumultuous globe, but they've never passed an audit, ever, a federal audit. And they have trillions of dollars in unaccounted for assets, which they add billions to every year. That's wasteful spending. And then we can go down and talk about all the different departments and three-letter agencies that we need to trim the fat and figure out how to stop spending more money than we bring in. It's a simple equation, right? I do it in my own home. I'm sure you do it in yours. And the second part of that economy/inflation is holding corporations accountable for inflating their prices. We saw Kroger admit to inflating some of their groceries upwards of 1,000%. It happened at Kellogg's. I was a mechanic there, and during the last gas crunch years ago, they announced they were going to raise the price of every one of their products by 25 cents to offset the price of shipping. Gas surplus, I suppose. Fair enough, right? I guess. But in the middle of winter, when nobody's driving anymore and gas prices fall back down, the quarter didn't come off. Certainly, it never comes off. What they did instead is had me and my maintenance team go and retrofit all of the packing equipment in the second biggest cold food manufacturing plant in the world to run smaller bags, put it in smaller cartons, and sell it to you for the same price. So, I saw it firsthand, and there needs to be accountability, and there needs to be a level playing field. For example, Dollar General. I've driven through Nebraska. I don't know how prevalent it is in Alabama, but you go to every small town in Nebraska, and there's a Dollar General at the end or beginning where you're going in every town. And then you drive through Main Street and you see boarded up windows where mom and pop shops used to be, because they cannot buy the same goods Dollar General can for the same price. So there needs to be a level playing field there. We shouldn't monopoly, and antitrust laws is certainly a big part of it. And Lena Khan's doing good work is doing really good work with the FTC right now, but they need to continue to be stronger in breaking up monopolies, because without competition, there's nothing to drive down costs. And that bleeds into our healthcare system. So many different facets of our lives. We save money by breaking up monopolies. So that's one of the things I really wanted to get in there and fight.
Right. And so why do you think, you mentioned at least one of the reasons, you feel like the kind of corporate spending on behalf of Fischer in Nebraska was one of the things, but if you were to kind of, assess, what do you think were some of the reasons that ultimately, even as close as it was, your race did come up short?
The border and immigration, and it's crazy because, Deb Fischer has been an incumbent for 12 years and she's done nothing on the border, but they love to use that as an issue to get reelected. We saw 2 border bills get shot down that would have provided 1,500 more agents. And, the people really on the border, the that want the agents the most are the agents themselves that are shorthanded. And it would have given more technology and more money to secure our ports of entry. And then we need to reform our immigration system too. So, there's a 10-year backlog of asylum seekers. So what do you think they're going to do? They're just going to come over illegally because they can't do it illegally because the system's broken. So she lied, and she said I wanted to give Social Security benefits to anybody that's in this country unlawfully. I've never said that. It's not true. Don't believe that. But, they spent $10 million in ads painting me out to be somebody like that. And unfortunately, enough money was spent and enough people believed it at the end of the day. Couldn't get out and talk to all 1.2 million voters individually. So I think at the end of the day, that's how corrupt our politics are. You could get on TV and say anything about anybody, and there's no referee and there's no repercussion of doing so.
Right. Is there anything that, looking back now, that you would do differently, you think?
Yeah, I left it all out on the field. And then a lot of money started to come in at the end. But unfortunately, it was a day late and a dollar short. But no, I really can't think of anything. Maybe I would have tried to have a beefier field team, but we had 6 offices open across the state, and we had over 200 volunteers. So I can't really say I could have done anything too much different other than try to defend myself better from the attack ads.
Right. And so, I've alluded to this before, but there are union members in Alabama that are coming to me considering running for office as an independent. What would your advice be?
Just do what you do every day. Clock in and work your ass off. That's what you got to do, especially as an independent. But right now, we're seeing. I'll even go so far as to call it a movement right now. They're the fastest growing demographic of registering voters and people leaving their parties are going to being independent because people are fed up with what they're seeing. And so I think right now, especially in 2026, I think we're going to see a lot of independents stepping up at all levels of government. And so I would just say, find out what district you live in, and start by talking to either your steward or your business agent and letting them know, like, hey, look what they did in Nebraska. We need more people to run too, and I want to be a part of it. So that's where I would start. Get your union support, get some early money going, and then start building your team.
So what's next for Dan Osborn?
Well, I'm going back to work as a fitter right now, but we have plans. I live in a congressional district where I ran ahead of Harris by 25 points. I ran ahead of both the Republican and Democrat by like 14 points in my district. So there's a mayor race, there's a governor race, and there's a congressional race in the House coming up in 2026. And and there's another Senate race too. Pete Ricketts, there was a special election. Pete Ricketts seats up in 2 years. So we're going to start talking about trying it again.
All right. I think that's a really, the fact that you're going back to work as a fitter right now, right? And I think that what we know for a fact that if Fischer had lost, she would not be going to work in a real job. She would be some sort of consultant or a lobbyist or something, right? Making millions of dollars per year. And so I think that really speaks to the difference between the two of you as people and the constituencies that you
represent. You do not represent a constituency that can float you into a fancy, multi-million-dollar job when a race comes up short. And so I think that I think that is almost as good a reason to vote for you as any, because after it's over, if you don't get elected, you have to go back to work, and Deb Fischer wouldn't. Sure. So, Dan Osborn,
we are starting the Working Class Heroes Action Fund, though, to help other union members and hopefully veterans run as independent in their prospective states too. So I'll be staying busy after I get off work, making phone calls and trying to fundraise for that.
Well, there you go. Dan Osborn, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us this morning. Is there anything else that you want to share before we let you go?
No, just, especially to all the stewards out there, just keep it up, stay strong, because we're definitely stronger together. I saw it on the strike at Kellogg's. I saw the solidarity with all the unions in my race. So it's super important because we're definitely stronger together.
All right. Appreciate it. Dan Osborn, independent in Nebraska, union steamfitter. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we are going to take a break. We're going to be right back with Boss Watch. We'll also take your calls. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. We're going to take a break and be right back.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and neighbors are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough to keep their jobs. We need to fix this. Let's close the health care coverage gap. To learn more, visit coveralabama.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Iron Workers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs, from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Iron Workers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'm Attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit nalc.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison here with not with my co-host, sorry. Adam Keller is out of the office today. He's got to go to work. Working with the stagehands, putting together a show. So if you're seeing a music show today in Huntsville, it may have been put on by our friend Adam Keller. But that's where he is today. We have a caller on the line. Let's bring them on the air. This caller is from a 503 area code. 503 area code, what's your name and where are you calling from? Caller, 503 area code, what's your name? Where are you calling from? I think the caller is, or maybe, I don't know if there may be a problem on our end, potentially. It says they're muted. Don't know why that is. But if you want to get where this caller is about to be, hopefully, if everything works out, you can give us a call, 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857 is the phone number. So let's try this again. Caller from a 503 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Oh, okay. Well, and they just hung up. So if you want to call back, caller from a 503 area code, you can give us a call, 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. Appreciate everybody tuning us. Somebody's in the chat saying that they're 503. Yeah, give us a call back. Appreciate everybody tuning in the chat. We got some 40 people watching us. Only 24 people have liked the stream. Let's go ahead and like that stream if you haven't yet. And Joe and Mel in the Facebook, watching us on Facebook, say good morning. Good morning, Joe and Mel. Longtime listeners. Appreciate y'all. Bill says, run BB. I'm not sure what that means. Fit Over 50 says politicians are supposed to work for us. Indeed. Yeah. That is, that was the exciting thing about Dan Osborn. Like, I have different politics than Dan. I think it's clear for people who are longtime listeners of the program. My politics are not exactly the same as Dan's. In some instances, but I think at the core, we do share the same core that a lot of people share, even if they don't realize it, which is that we care about working people, that we want the best for working people, and so and we think that politicians should work for workers, and so that's why Dan's campaign was so exciting to me, is that it did seem like
that he did care about people. He wanted to work for the people, and so it is a shame how the election ended up. But for somebody who has never run for office before to have been able to raise $14 million, to have come within striking distance of a 12-year incumbent in the United States Senate as an independent without the backing of a political party, that's really impressive. So I think we've got the caller on the line now. If you've got the stream on in the background, you'll want to turn that off. Caller from a 503 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from? No, we put him back in the waiting room. Oh man. We're having a hard time today with the phones. I don't know. Okay. I think Gator Gay said, I gave up. Sorry. Yeah, I think that you were like, I could hear you. You said hello, and I was about to, Well, what a bummer. But yeah, Dan's run was really, really interesting and exciting for me as somebody who cares about folks. So 844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857 if anybody else wants to call in. We'll also be taking calls in the second half of the program. We have a whole second half of the show. In the second half, we're going to be talking to Kurt Hackbarth. Kurt Hackbarth is a freelance journalist who lives in Mexico, and we're going to be talking about the Mexican elections and what folks can learn from that. So, caller from a 503 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Did I get it this time?
You did. Yes, I can hear you.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Hi, my name is Alex. I'm calling from the state of Oregon, actually. So,
Alex
hello.
from Oregon. What's on your mind?
I'm calling because I just wanted to give a shout out to all the other Teamsters members listening this morning. I've been kind of dropping in the live chat and checking out people from the different locals and shit, but I appreciate kind of the vibe of the show. This is my first time listening. It sounds like you got lots of different people from different political places and orientations, and as a Teamster, that really speaks to me. There's lots of different kinds of us, but we're all workers at the end of the day. And we got to stand in solidarity. So what's up, Teamsters?
Yep, absolutely agree. Thanks for the call.
All right, thanks so much.
All right. Let's go ahead and get to Boss Watch. We do these two segments every week, or we try to, where we take a look at what bosses were up to, what workers were up to in the South with Last Week in Southern Labor. And we also take a look at what bosses were up to in the South with Boss Watch. So let's start in Florida, where a U.S. Department of Labor investigation found that 2 contractors could have prevented a crane collapse at a Fort Lauderdale residential construction site in April 2024, which caused a 27-year-old rigger to suffer fatal injuries after falling approximately 30 stories. Investigators with the department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration learned that 2 workers employed by Phoenix Rigging and Erecting LLC were installing a section on a tower crane to increase its height when a support cable failed and the platform on which they stood became displaced. One worker, who was wearing the required fall protection and tied off, was rescued, but another worker whose lanyard was not connected to an anchor point was fatally injured. OSHA cited Phoenix Rigging and Erecting in Mableton, Georgia for 3 serious violations for failing to do the following: identifying and replacing or otherwise repair corroded and cracked pins or bolts designed to secure the crane's climbing frame and apply end connections properly. They failed to ensure the use of fall protection equipment, and they failed to conduct pre-inspections of crane components before allowing employees to start work, and ensure cranes were inspected properly by a qualified person for damage or excessive wear. The agency also cited a Canonsburg, Pennsylvania crane rental company, Maxim Crane Works LP, for 2 serious violations for failing to do the following: observing deficiencies to significantly corroded and cracked pins and bolts and improperly applying end connections. They failed to allow employees to start work without conducting pre-inspections of crane components, including but not limited to U-bolt clamps, bolts, pins, thimbles, and wire ropes, to ensure those were inspected adequately by a qualified person for damage or excessive wear. OSHA cited the construction contractors for 5 serious violations total and proposed $61,000 in penalties, the maximum amount that OSHA can legally recommend. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that over 1,000 construction workers were fatally injured on the job in 2022, with 423 of those fatalities related to falls from elevation, falls, or trips. In Missouri, a Missouri grain cooperative could have prevented an employee's fatal engulfment in a storage bin in May 2024 had it followed federal workplace safety requirements, the U.S. Department of Labor determined. Responding to the employer's report of a worker fatality, investigators with the Department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration learned that 3 employees of MFA Incorporated, operating as MFA Railcar, were removing corn screenings comprised of clumps of corn dust from a bin at the company's Hamilton facility. One worker entered the bin to clear the screenings and became engulfed when the screenings shifted. Another worker tried to rescue his coworker but was engulfed to his waist before being rescued by first responders from the local fire department. OSHA found the Columbia Grain Cooperative had not completed a required bin entry permit before allowing the worker inside. Additionally, the conveyor was running with the bin's bottom gate open, increasing the risk of product shifting and the risk of engulfment. The employer also lacked adequate rescue equipment, failed to ensure the worker wore a harness and a lifeline, and did not follow other required safety procedures before entering the bin. Following the inspection, OSHA cited MFA for 1 willful violation and 5 serious violations and proposed penalties of $240,000. Specifically, the agency identified the following safety failures: lacking adequate rescue equipment on site, failing to protect employees from falls on working surfaces, not verifying that mechanical, electrical, and hydraulic and pneumatic equipment inside grain storage structures were de-energized, locked out, and tagged out to prevent operation when workers entered, allowing workers to enter a bin without completing the permit process, and not testing the bin's atmosphere before workers entered. Over in Louisiana, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, settled cases of alleged Clean Air Act violations at 3 facilities in southern Louisiana as part of the agency's focus on achieving results in communities with environmental justice concerns. The cases involve alleged unauthorized emissions of chemicals, violations of startup, shutdown, malfunction requirements, and other requirements of the National Emission Standards for Hazardous Air Pollutants. The violations were found at DuPont Pontchartrain Works petrochemical facility in LaPlace, Vopak Incorporated in Hahnville, and Westlake Chemical, formerly Axial, in Lake Charles. Inspections at these facilities were part of the Pollution Accountability Team, a special enforcement project developed as a follow-up to Administrator Michael Regan's Journeys to Justice Tour in Louisiana. Inspection reports for these cases are available online. The DuPont settlement assesses a civil penalty of $480,000 and addresses violations including unauthorized emissions above the allowed limit at a benzene storage tank and failure to comply with regulatory requirements for an open-ended line. Conditions of the settlement include installing advanced equipment on the benzene storage tank, enhanced monitoring using EPA Method 21 and optical gas imaging, a third-party audit of all conservation or emergency vents storing benzene or Group 1 liquids, record keeping and reporting requirements, and updating permits as needed. The Vopak settlement assesses a civil penalty of $168,000 and addresses violations at the company's for-hire bulk storage terminal, which stores raw materials product and benzene containing wastewater from an adjacent facility. Violations include unauthorized emissions from external floating roof tanks identified using EPA's geospatial measurement of air pollution technology. The settlement requires the facility to conduct quarterly inspections of each floating roof tank, including rim seals, a permit and operations review conducted by an independent third-party auditor, and complete site-specific corrective actions. The Westlake settlement includes a civil penalty of $825,000 and addresses violations of startup, shutdown, and malfunction requirements and unauthorized emissions, among others. The settlement requires the company to submit a performance testing plan and conduct an annual additional performance test of its 2 thermal oxidizers, submit that to the EPA, and a list of all pressure relief devices used for hazardous air pollutants. We have several dishonorable mentions this week. The U.S. EPA announced agreements with 4 companies: AES Puerto Rico in Puerto Rico, Keystone Conemaugh Projects in Pennsylvania, Alabama Power Company in Alabama, and the Public Service Company of Colorado in Colorado to settle violations of the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act's regulations related to coal ash surface impoundments and landfills. The settlements require companies to take certain actions, including addressing groundwater monitoring issues, conducting effective and protective groundwater cleanup, addressing emergency planning, and paying a fine. AES's fine is $71,000, and Alabama Power's is $278,000. Synergy Entertainment Group Incorporated, a Texas corporation operating multiple cinema and entertainment centers across the country, will pay $137,000 and provide other relief to settle a retaliation lawsuit brought by the EEOC, which alleged that the company just straight up told a worker in North Carolina that she was not eligible for rehire because she filed a previous discrimination charge with the EEOC after being fired from a bartending position in 2022. Vibra Life of Katy, LLC, a rehabilitation and assisted living facility in Katy, Texas, will pay $80,000 and furnish other relief to settle an EEOC disability discrimination and retaliation lawsuit that alleged an employee with a sleep disorder was hired for a position to work 36 hours a week, but then was told she would have to work 48 hours a week. When she requested an accommodation to only work the hours listed in the job posting that she applied for, she was fired. Investigators with the U.S. Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division found that a South Carolina cleaning services provider misclassified 59 workers as independent contractors, resulting in the company paying employees straight time rates for all hours worked over 40 instead of the time and a half premium for overtime hours. The employer also failed to keep records of the amount of time worked by employees as required by law. The division recovered $53,000 for 59 workers. The U.S. Department of Labor announced that its Mine Safety and Health Administration completed impact inspections in September 2024 at 8 mines in Indiana, Kentucky, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wisconsin, and issued 112 violations. The U.S. Department of Labor filed a complaint after investigators with its Employee Benefits Security Administration found that since at least 2016, the company's Suffolk Administrative Services and Providence Insurance Company and their current and former executives Alexander Renfro, William Bryan, and Arjun Ziegler have marketed, sold, and serviced employer-sponsored health benefit plans while collecting and diverting significant fees for themselves in violation of the Employee Retirement Income Security Act. The U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs has entered into an agreement with McKesson Medical Surgical Incorporated, one of the nation's largest distributors of medical supplies, to resolve alleged systemic hiring discrimination against nearly 900 Black, Hispanic, and white applicants at its Grapevine, Texas distribution facility. And Surest Property Group and its divisions, Surest Property Services and Surest Development, a real estate operating company and asset management firm in Atlanta, Georgia, agreed to pay $75,000 and provide other relief to settle a race discrimination lawsuit filed by the EEOC that alleged the company fired its only Black employee because of his race. We did have some good news, though. Fewer workers are dying from hazards, where the U.S. Department of Labor's Occupational Safety and Health Administration has focused its enforcement resources. Preliminary agency data show a decrease in fatalities that the agency is mandated to investigate, including significant reductions in fatal injuries from trench collapses and falls, 2 of the leading causes of death among construction industry workers. A quote from Assistant Secretary for Occupational Safety and Health, Douglas Parker: "These numbers are promising evidence that stronger enforcement and collaboration with labor and management, driven by the Biden-Harris administration's worker-centered approach, is saving lives. Most striking is the improvement in areas we have focused on with employers and unions. Our state program partners have also seen improvements. In fiscal year 2024, federal OSHA investigated 826 worker deaths, an 11% reduction from 928 in the previous year. Excluding COVID-related deaths, this is the lowest number of worker fatalities OSHA has been mandated to investigate since 2017. So, some good news there to wrap up Boss Watch. Coming up on the end of the show today, we'll take a call, or coming up on the end of the first half of the program, like I said, we've got a really exciting interview with Kurt Hackbarth, a freelance journalist in Mexico, about the Mexican elections and what they might be able to inform, how they might be able to inform us, people who are interested in pro-worker politicians winning office. But we do have a caller on the line, so let's go ahead and bring them on the air. This caller is from a 647 area code. 647 area code, what's your name and where are you calling from?
It's Quirky Geek Girl from Toronto.
Hi, Quirky Geek Girl from Toronto. Yeah, what's on your mind?
A little light in the tunnel of the port strike that was sent back. I just did a little bit of looking up, and they will be fighting it in the courts, because we do actually have a right to strike and collective bargaining in Canada. So the last time that happened, it actually got overturned by the Supreme Court. So the fight is not over, and it will end up in the courts. So that's the little bit of light that it's not over and won't be stuck with binding arbitration. But we just had another strike start up yesterday with the post office, and their strike 6 years ago ended with back to work legislation and forced arbitration. I do not remember what the end result was, but it's just this constant cycle. The Liberals are not super great with labor. They don't really have a union base. The party that supports unions is the New Democratic Party, or NDP. And the NDP have really been propping up the Liberals since the last election to keep them in power. And when they sent the rail workers back to work this past summer, that actually broke the agreement. And so the whole country has been just like waiting to see when the pin is really going to be pulled on our next election, because it has to happen before the fall next year. But it can literally, especially with this latest back to work legislation, could force a no confidence vote. And we would have an election probably by the first couple weeks of January if that was to happen, which would really suck because conservatives would decimate.
Yeah,
that would be even worse for labor in this country. So that would be my assumption. I don't know much at all about Canadian politics, but just based on my experience in American politics, that would be my assumption. But that being the case, even though the NDP, my understanding is that they're kind of like a junior coalition partner with the Liberals in Parliament, and so even though, or I'm not exactly sure how unions line up in Canada, but my assumption would be that they support generally the Liberals or the NDP, and so with that being the case, and mostly the NDP, but mostly the NDP is like the union party.
Gotcha. Well, so with that being the case, why is the Liberals, because the Liberals need the NDP to be able to maintain control of the government, why are they attacking the unions with these kind of back to work demonstration or back to work legislation?
I am just as confused as you, because it's like they're a hot mess. Because they keep embarrassing themselves repeatedly for the last 4 years. and Justin Trudeau refuses to step down, so much so it may have caused his impending divorce.
Wow. Well, there you go. That's the answer. Sorry I asked you so close to the end, but we have to we got to wrap up the first half. You can stay on it if
let you go.
Yep. Thanks. Appreciate it. Thanks for the call. We will find us online, Facebook and YouTube, if you want to keep listening to the program. Otherwise, we will see you next week. All right, folks, we're off the radio now. We're going to take a break really quick. We're going to go into overtime. Really excited for this conversation with Kurt Hackbarth. We also have a couple of clips that we're going to play. And if you want to get where those two callers were, you can call 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. Going to take a break. Going to be right back. Welcome back. You are still listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That phone number is 844-899-8857. Appreciate the callers that we have gotten, and appreciate everybody hanging out in the chat. We have a really cool scrolling background on our YouTube page that's like, folks kind of working in like a desolate kind of hellscape sort of imagery. It's kind of bleak, but it's really cool artistically, I think. It was created by a local artist, Charles Hastings, aka Solo Monk. And it's kind of, just like a worker kind of imagery, people doing people doing work, people doing labor in a sort of desolate kind of landscape. And somebody who's supposedly a conservative says, so what's up with the background? Is that cotton fields? Is this sort of racist? Is this song about slaves? What's going on with the messaging? And then somebody responded in the chat, are you sure you're not a Democrat? Because this guy has been like kind of trolling the chat the whole show, calling everybody else a Democrat, basically. And so it's really funny that I do think that this guy, this like Trump supporter who's been kind of calling everybody else a Democrat or whatever, is the first person this whole show to even mention like racism as a topic, and he's lobbing it at us. So I think that's, an interesting piece of irony. And I enjoy it. I enjoy that irony, and I appreciate Fit Over 50 for making that, point. But yeah, I think it's cool. And then also the second part of his comment, is the song sort of about slaves. Like, that was kind of strange because like you can just listen to the lyrics of the song. The song is about workers should join unions and asking workers which side you are on. Are you on the side of your class, the working class, or are you on the boss's side, right? It was a song written by Florence Reese, and that actually the vocals there are performed by the original writer, Florence Reese, in the 30s or 40s. She wrote this song during a strike by the United Mine Workers. She was the mother or the wife of a miner who was on strike, and so she wrote this song to the tune of an old like Baptist hymn. And it's really cool. It's become kind of like a working class anthem and is very popular. And so we took the lyrics that she performed at like a UMWA convention in like the 40s or 50s. And had somebody remix them for us. Jules Taylor, the producer of the Working People podcast, he did the remix of it and put in the cool bass and the banjo and all that stuff. So yeah, there are a lot of like really, really talented artists, and we are really we're really proud to be able to showcase some of their work, and proud that they have been willing to lend us their artistic talents, because I am not artistic at all. I'm really, frankly, kind of inept with technology. If you go back, we've been on the radio for 4.5 years. In April of next year, so like in 6 months, we will have been on the radio for 5 years, for half a decade. That's crazy. But we've also been putting this show online the whole time too. So if you go back, and I don't really recommend you do this because it's not good, but if you go back to some of our first programs in 2020, you will see my handiwork. I was the person that was doing a lot of the like camera work. I was the person that was doing the thumbnails. I was the person that was doing the audio. And it was not good. It was not good. And so now we have something like professional help. We've got folks that are doing board op for us. We've got folks, we are sitting in this like pretty professional kind of studio. We have folks who are professionally doing our post-production audio and video work. We've got people professionally doing graphics for us. And then sometimes we have other artists contribute their like artistic stuff through like actual like visual art or audio art. So
like songs and stuff. So yeah. That's my response to that very funny Trump supporter, the first person to call somebody racist today. Let's take a look at this clip here from Vivek Ramaswamy, failed presidential candidate and billionaire, I think. Is he a billionaire? He has a lot of money. And he's talking about, he is one of the people that are heading up this Department of Government Efficiency, which I am not the first person to point this out, but it is very funny that the Department of Government Efficiency has two chairs, two people doing one job. I think that, there's a little bit of irony in that, Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk. So that's very funny. He's heading this up, and he's got this plan for reducing the debt, and so does Elon Musk. They both have lots of plans, but here is something that Vivek was talking about, what he would like to do with Tucker Carlson.
The mass deportation of millions of unelected federal bureaucrats out of the DC bureaucracy. And I do think that is what's going to save this country in the long run. But you can't do that. I think you actually can.
You can't fire. We can all be fired. I've been fired many times. Yeah. I'm sure you just lost a presidential race. Like we've all. The only
Okay, pause it for a second. That was very funny. That was very funny of Tucker. He was like, we've all been fired. You just lost a presidential race. I wonder if Tucker does not like Vivek, and that was like a purposeful jab, because that was a very funny and unnecessary aside. Okay.
It cannot fail that has actual tenure. It's not Harvard professors.
Not even. Yep.
It's not even.
Yep.
It's federal bureaucrats. No, Amy Wax just got, tenure is no protection at all compared to the protection of federal employment.
Yeah. So the one difference.
Yeah. So let's pause that for a second. I have been a federal bureaucrat. For the last 7 years, I have been a federal employee. Okay. And the idea, and a union member and a steward, and I have gone through grievance cases and discipline cases, and I have represented people in discipline cases. I have read discipline cases, and the idea that federal employees cannot be fired is so ridiculous. It is just, it's stupid, frankly, because, it's either stupid or like maliciously ignorant, right? Because if you knew anything, if you talked to union members in the federal government, we would tell you that people can be fired, and we have seen people fired, but to the extent that there is a problem, and I'm not even going to grant that, but management has a job, right? Management has a job, and their job is supposed to be discipline and managing and supervising and training employees, right? And so actually a lot of times when you see people that are unproductive, and this has been the case that I have found almost universally, every time that I have found an employee that is objectively underperforming, I can point out objectively how they have not received the proper training and guidance from management. Right? And so being a federal employee, having been a federal employee, I'm no longer a federal employee. I have a different job now. But having been a federal employee for 7 years, it is so frustrating hearing these people at the top of the economic pyramid acting like they know anything about what goes on at the bottom among working people is infuriating, is absolutely infuriating. And I can also say that I have been through grievance cases where ultimately I do think it was right that an employee was terminated, and this employee was terminated. But it took a while, because of management, right? And so, I don't know, it's just so frustrating seeing this kind of stuff. And this is interesting, actually. This guy who's been kind of trolling, but he would argue, I'm sure, that he wasn't trolling, but being kind of purposely, at the very least, disagreeable in the chat, says that He's a union member and a federal employee and union steward as well. Also more years than 7. I'm at 11 years, pushing 12 years. So this guy has worked for the federal government a little bit longer than I did. And so I'm interested in how he perceives Tucker Carlson, attacking him, right? Attacking him. He's one of the people that Tucker Carlson thinks has it too good. So that's interesting. Let's continue.
First of all, we have a president who I think has the spine to actually step up and do it. But the second thing is we actually have and not to get too, in the weeds here, but we actually have a legal landscape with the current Supreme Court that allows us to do what couldn't have been done in the last half century.
But they have a moral right to work from home 10 hours a week at our expense at a far higher wage than the average American.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, let's pause it. That's so infuriating. For one, because let's just take that at face value. It's not true. It's not true that federal employees all work from home for a significantly higher wage than the far higher wage than the average American worker. Where does Tucker Carlson work from? Where is he recording right now? He's recording in his lavish Maine retreat. Working from home. And if there is even a tiny argument to be made that federal employees make more than the average worker, which there is not. Federal employees make something like 20% less than similarly situated workers in the private sector. Tucker Carlson makes exponentially more than the average American worker working from home. And here he is chastising, let's be generous, people who make $50,000 to $100,000 a year, most of whom again are not working from home. Most federal employees do not work from home. But some people can work from home. I was fortunate enough to have a position where I could work from home, and the evidence does not show that working from home actually decreases productivity. And here's how you know that the evidence does not show that. They never point to any. They say these things and they make allusions and implications that telework reduces productivity. They make all these implications and stuff like that, but they never actually show you any work, right? They never point to, 50% of Social Security Administration, 50% of the Social Security Administration has been working from home, and they have been processing fewer claims for per worker now than they did previously. Because that doesn't exist. That evidence doesn't exist. And so what he's trying to do is he is just trying to build a wedge between some people who can work from home, which is a benefit, right? A benefit that many people do not have, and the people that do not work from home. And all he's trying to do is make the people's lives who can work from home and who do work from home and who are productive working from home, all he's trying to do is turn other workers' anger against these people to make their life worse so that the workers who don't work from home and the workers who do work from home don't come together and organize against the bosses who work from home and take more of the value that they create. Okay, let's continue.
The thing is,
but they have a moral right. You can't complain about it.
You actually brought up a really interesting dimension of this. If you literally just mandated that they have to actually show up to work Monday through Friday, I know, radical idea.
They don't go to work.
Actually, a good number of them would quit that way. Right. That step alone. So you don't even have to talk about, you want a mass firing, a mass exodus. Just tell them they have to come back 5 days a week from 8 p.m. to 6 p.m. Like many Americans, most Americans who work hard to earn a living in this country, just show up physically to work. You'd actually have about a 25% thinning out of the federal bureaucracy right there. So that's an easy first step.
That's just great. Like purposely, like not even, there's no like veneer of we need to do this for productivity, we need to do this because that's what's best for the federal service, it's the most efficient kind of thing. It's just like we just want to make people's lives worse so that we have fewer public servants, and that's the whole thing. Like that's it. Like, and that is just so frustrating to see that, and to see working people like buy into it. That's even more frustrating because obviously you know, people who shoot, I lost my train of thought. Anyway, it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating seeing stuff like that. And then this person in the chat says, I highly believe in working in person and not from home, just like school. In-person school is better than online school. It's not the same, actually, right? Because particularly, people of my union, AFGE, they represent a lot of people who work for, I mentioned the Social Security Administration for a reason. People, they have shown that actually they're more productive at home, and that actually makes sense. Like there is a value, particularly in collaborative workplaces. There is some value to being in person and being able to just like walk over to a person's desk and ask a question. But there are also jobs that are just more like rote, right? It's like performing the same task over and over, and actually being in the office provides more distraction. That's what my union members from the Social Security Administration tell me. They say that they do more work when they're at home. For one, because they actually end up working more. They work longer hours when they work from home. And then also there are less distractions at home than there are in the office. And so it's not true. I know that there are some people who have this kind of feeling about it, but it's not true, and the data doesn't back it up. I mean, the General Services Administration, the Government Accountability Office, I think that's GAO. They've done a study on telework, and they have shown that telework provides, there's no change in productivity or a positive change in productivity. That's been the findings from like a survey of studies in different environments with both qualitative and quantitative metrics from reporting from both the employees and the managers, right? So it's just not true that actually people that people are less productive. And he says, oh, please, people who work at home I've talked to have it easy. They know it. No drive time, and they don't have to put pants on. That's a benefit. Yes, they're like, I would not want to have to go back into the office 5 days a week, right? It is easier. I'm not saying that it's not a benefit. There's a reason that people who work from home do not want to go back to the office. It's because, yes, it is easier. It provides material comforts and benefits, and it's nice to be able to wear pajamas and go to work and not have drive time and not waste that amount of time that I'm not being compensated for, right? That's really nice. But that doesn't mean I'm not working. That's you're talking about totally different arguments now, right? I mean, you got to acknowledge that. Right? We were originally talking about, are people who work from home more or less productive? And now we're talking about, is it nicer to work from home? Obviously, it's nicer to work from home. Obviously, right? But that's not the same question as, are people more productive or less productive? Is it in the interest of an efficient federal service for people to work from home or in the office? That's the question that we should be asking. If we are not being driven by these weird, like, I feel like people ought to do, if we're not being driven by our feelings, but if we're being driven by what is in the interest of an efficient federal service, what is in the interest of the American public that federal employees serve, we have to go by the data, and the data do not indicate that working from home is less productive. Do we have Kurt in the Zoom? Fantastic. So, incumbent parties the world over have lost ground in this year's elections. In fact, the Financial Times have a graph that's really interesting that said this year, for the first time ever, all incumbent parties in the developed world lost vote share. Now, Mexico was not included in this group of developed countries, but also, incumbent parties, even in non-developed countries or underdeveloped or whatever the Financial Times would say, they also fared poorly. But Mexico bucked this trend, with the governing party Morena gaining vote share and electing its second president, Claudia Sheinbaum, the first woman and the first Jewish person to be elected to that office in Mexico. There might be things that a party interested in building a governing majority on the backs of a working class coalition could learn from this victory.
And so we have on the line now Kurt Hackbarth, a writer, playwright, and freelance journalist based in Mexico. He is a co-founder of the independent media site Mex Elects, and he is now here to talk about this win in Mexico and what we can learn in the United States. Kurt, thanks for taking the time to talk to us. Welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
Thanks very much, Jacob. A pleasure to be with you.
Really excited to have you. I have heard some of your interviews on Left Reckoning. Friends of the show over there, David and Matt, they recommended you, so appreciate you taking the time. And so let's just start with the hook, right? Why should I care what happened in Mexico? What is there for me to learn about what Mexico did? Why should we even care about this?
Right. Great question to start. And I think the answer is Mexico shows that the left can win, and it can win big, and it can win in the face of the same international conditions that, have seen other incumbent governments lose. In the face of COVID, in the face of inflation pressures, in the face of supply chain pressures. What we saw in Mexico is a left government, Morena, which has governed since 2018. And just to point out, Morena was just founded as a party in 2014. So it's a very young, new, exciting party that bucked, Mexico's traditional system and old regime. And not only won an overwhelming victory in 2018, but showed that it could win again. And it did that by putting workers' issues first and foremost. I know this is a union-related program. So we're talking about a government that doubled the minimum wage over its 6 years in power. Did a union reform bill that provided for secret ballot elections for unions and required all union contracts to be renegotiated and to set up a whole new series of labor boards. It's limited outsourcing for companies so that companies can't outsource their core functions. Increased double vacation days. Increased profit sharing, increased pension reform, increased pension benefits, came out with a universal adult pension together with disability benefits, aid to dependent mothers, built out a welfare state where one didn't exist in Mexico. And, guess what? Voters liked it and gave them even bigger landslide this time. These things can happen. So to answer your first question, why should we care? It's because left governments are losing everywhere around the world because they've lost contact with their base, they've lost contact with the workers' movement, and Mexico shows that it doesn't have to be that way.
And so let's dig into these to these people and parties. Morena, you said it was founded in 2014. What is Morena?
Morena is a center-left party in Mexico. It's an acronym for Movimiento de Regeneración Nacional, which is the National Regeneration Movement. But it's also a very clever acronym because Morena in Spanish refers to a dark-skinned woman. And so let us not forget, since the time of the conquest and the colony, Mexico is very heavily hierarchized along race and class lines. The wealthy in Mexico are of European descent. Then you have a mestizo population in the middle, and at the bottom, historically, and very relegated through terrible historical process, Mexico's indigenous population. So part of what Morena was saying through that very deliberate choice of name is that this is the time for the Morenos, right? This is the time for Mexico's dark-skinned population, right? It's not, a racialized party by any means, but that is there. And it's interesting to see that, whereas in the 2018 election, the working class and poor vote was split amongst parties, there's been an interesting process of, and they've talked about class de-alignment in many countries. There's been a sort of a class realignment in Mexico where working class voters have come home to Morena. And so Sheinbaum in this most recent election a few months ago won an overwhelming victory amongst poor and working class voters, but also won middle class voters and also won upper middle class voters. So it was a cross-class coalition. So I think that's another example of how you can see that a party can pursue policies that benefit the working class without what the Democrats always say in the U.S., oh, no, we can't talk about these things because we're going to lose suburban voters. Again, saying it doesn't have to be that way.
Right. Yeah, well, and it's crazy because suburban voters are primarily they're higher paid workers, but they're like of the working class. If we conceptualize class in the kind of, what is your relation to the means of production, right? They have a lot of the same interests as the more stereotypical working class electorate. And so that is, that's an interesting description of Morena. And so where does AMLO fit into Morena? Is Morena really built around AMLO, or was AMLO kind of grafted onto Morena? Like what were the order of operations there, and what's AMLO's background? The previous president, or I guess current, right? Or I don't think Sheinbaum is inaugurated yet. So maybe current or former president from 2018 until now, AMLO, his background and relationship to Morena.
Yeah, actually, Sheinbaum is in office. She took office on October 1st, and it's interesting because we've talked about Morena as a party, but it's also still important to have a charismatic leader. I mean, there's still still fundamental in a movement, and that was really the role that Andrés Manuel López Obrador has played in all of this. López Obrador has been a colossal figure in Mexican politics over the course of a generation. He comes from the state of Tabasco, came from lower middle class, shopkeeper parents, grew up in a small town very far away from the elite Mexico City governing class that has governed Mexico so badly for so long before him. So just the fact that AMLO was the leader was a challenge to this elite. He speaks with a regional accent, a Tabascan accent, right? Imagine how regional accents are perceived in the United States. The same in Mexico. They're perceived as being hicks, or people who are uncultivated and people who shouldn't govern, right? AMLO had to go through all of this prejudice, and very early on demonstrated that he had real leadership potential. He started college in 1973. In the second month he was in college, Allende was overthrown in Chile, Salvador Allende. So I think the whole big question of his generation of leaders in Latin America is, how do you achieve power and not get overthrown by a U.S.-sponsored coup? How do you do that? How do you thread that needle? And that was the big argument going forward for his generation. AMLO then became an activist leader in the 80s and 90s with the predecessor party to Morena, which was the PRD. At that time, Mexico was a one-party state under this hegemonic party of the PRI, the famous PRI that governed Mexico for 70 years. And so one of his first major political moves was to engage in a march from Tabasco to Mexico City so that the PRD's first electoral victories would be recognized. They were trying to claim that they didn't win, and not going to go into the weeds in Mexican political history, but AMLO showed that he was a street leader. He was someone who could lead marches, who could lead encampments, who could lead sit-ins, who could defend the indigenous population of Tabasco, who could get beamed by the police and have blood on his face. And these videos are still around on social media. So he came from below in that sense. He was a very successful mayor of Mexico City from 2000 to 2006. In his first run for president, it was stolen from him, the famous or infamous fraud of 2006. He kept at it. In 2012, went at it again, and had a whole array of forces against him that were out buying votes and intimidating votes, and lost again. Not lost in quotes. And then he finally realized, we can't do this through the PRD anymore. The PRD is no longer a vehicle for the Mexican parliamentary left. We have to do a new party. Right? Now, Mexican law makes that easier than the U.S. in the sense of there's public financing of campaigns and there's proportional representation seats. So if you have your assemblies and get your signatures, you can get funds, party building funds. And Morena started that way. Started as a party in the 2015 midterms, won a bunch of seats, and that was the trampoline for their victory in 2018. But one cannot understate the effect of López Obrador on Mexican politics. With everything against him, he set up a new party, governed well, and also controlled the discourse, which in a way which I think is really important to learn in the U.S. He held daily press conferences for 2 hours, up to 3 hours. We took any question that came, anything from anywhere. And that was his way of turning the tables on the corporate press, which is used to setting the terms of the discourse, right? And if you let them run, they'll do a Sanders on someone, or they'll do a Corbyn on someone, and they'll bury them. So AMLO's 2-hour press conferences in the morning set the terms of the debate, set the news out, and it allowed his government to weather all of the expected attacks from the national and international press. And he left office a few weeks ago with a 70 to 80% approval rating.
Wow. That's really amazing. And a 2-hour daily press conference. I mean, he had a talk radio show. He just had a talk radio show every morning. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned some of the accomplishments from AMLO's term. I'm interested in what you think some of the most impactful things were, and how they were received by the party, or by the public, I mean. So if you had to point to like the top 3 to 5 things that really have begun to shift the balance of power in Mexico towards working people, what would some of those things be? And is that how, is your estimation of what those 3 policies are, does that match the estimation that the working class themselves in Mexico would have? I'm asking that question to kind of set it up for a conversation about what the Democrats have done during this term, and maybe the kind of disalignment between how the Democrats are viewing what they're doing and how the public is viewing what they're doing. But talk through some of that.
So just a quick point on what you were saying before. It basically was a talk radio show. It was a talk radio show before the nation, right? And that AMLO very early on glimpsed at the potential of social media, right? To break the Mexican media monopoly. Mexico has 2 private networks, Televisa and TV Azteca, like the major media networks in the U.S. They controlled the debate, very right-wing. Radio in Mexico, like right-wing radio in the U.S., was uniformly anti-AMLO, uniformly anti-Morena. So what do you do in the face of that constant daily onslaught? You use social media, you use alternative media. There was AMLO Radio, there was AMLO TV back 15 years ago. And so he was very ahead of the curve on that. And what's interesting as well, that in those daily press conferences, he didn't just have reporters from the major networks. He also had YouTubers in there, people from alternative media. Wow. It was a much more open discourse, and that was important. Just a few months ago, I was at an independent journalist conference that was held right there in National Palace, and AMLO hosted it and gave the keynote. For independent media, YouTubers, like the Valley Labor Report, just that kind of openness to independent media, and not buying into the elitism of the Beltway credentialed class, or the equivalent in Mexico, is important. Anyway, to go back to your question, I think without a doubt, the universal pension was huge. Mexico was like the U.S. before Social Security, with massive, with a very high percentage of senior citizen poverty, and Mexico traditionally has a very close-knit family structure, but senior citizens having to depend on family members. And now you have this dignity of senior citizens being able to say, I can treat you to dinner, or I can buy my own medication, or I've got my card here, and don't worry about it. I can get this. I can do my own expenses on this. So this dignifying of senior citizens was wonderful to see. I think definitely the minimum wage hikes Mexico's minimum wage is still far too low, but it went up 20% a year, so it's doubled over the course of his period, and that had knock-on effects to other wages. So wages in general have outstripped inflation by 35% over AMLO's term. And there was actually an interesting labor case, the 3220 movement in Matamoros, in the maquiladoras on the border. They had a labor clause in their contract that minimum wage increases would be reflected in their collective contract. And when the minimum wage started going up rather significantly, they said, all right, that, we get that too. And the bosses didn't want to do that. And that led to the walkout in Matamoros. And they actually won that strike, 2019, 2020. So a minimum wage hike can have other effects. So that's another one. I think another important rhetorical, well, let's just finish with the kind of the pro-workers stuff. I think the pension, I think the minimum wage increase, I think the union bill, because of the long history of the PRI co-opting unions, up to this day, most unions in Mexico are still company unions, and that's still a problem. So the union reform still has a long way to go on that, but that was very symbolically important for workers. And then, yeah, I think that and the vacation days. Mexico's vacation days start at 6, and now you get 12, and depending on the number of years you're in your employer, you can go up to 30.
Wow.
If you're not in an outsourced subcontracted job, which is why they also, restricted outsourcing. So all that together comes up with a reasonable package for workers and can kind of explain alignment. I would say one other important thing for AMLO, but outside of the policy aspect, was standing up for Mexican sovereignty to the U.S. Right? The U.S. has got a very bad habit of meddling and intervening in Latin America, all over the world, but especially in Mexico, because it's so close. And so his sovereignty discourse of we're a free, independent, sovereign nation was very important and powerful also to working class voters, because it provides a sense of dignity. After 30 years of a neoliberal regime, which was totally servile to the U.S. So, for example, when the Summit of the Americas was held in Los Angeles a couple of years ago, AMLO said, hey, I'm not going to go if every country in Latin America isn't invited. Let's not play games here. Is it a summit for everyone, or is it a summit just for your buddies? And he didn't go because they refused to invite, certain countries, right, that the U.S. is trying to keep under their thumb. So all that together is part of the AMLO mystique, let's say.
Right. And so, some Democrats and people who are supportive of Democrats have frustratedly pointed to some of Biden's real accomplishments on labor and the economy, and I don't want to deny that. I think you would have to deny reality to say that Biden has had some real accomplishments on improving the rights of working people and on spurring a new manufacturing manufacturing economy in the United States, but they're clearly not analogous. The working class in the United States are clearly not feeling this in the same way, clearly not being affected by these policies in the same way that they have been in Mexico. And so why do you think they're not analogous, what Biden has been able to do and what AMLO was able to do?
I think that's a really, really good question. And I think the initial answer is Biden's programs were temporary in large part. They were COVID spurred. So you had the increase in enhanced unemployment benefits. You had the child tax credit. You had the extended Medicaid benefits. All of those were great, but then they yanked them away. So what people are left with is, I had something and I lost it. So they wind up blaming the person who took them away without maybe even thinking about, well, maybe he gave it, we got them from that administration in the first place. They were a COVID expedient, but it seems like as soon as they could get away with getting rid of them, they pulled the plug. And so then you had the situation where just weeks before the election in the U.S., people were losing their Medicaid, enhanced Medicaid benefits. They'd already lost the child tax credit, and they had to start paying their student loan payments again. I mean, not brilliant politics. Whereas in Mexico, you have the situation where these programs were made permanent. They weren't just COVID expedients. And actually, the Sheinbaum government now, because Mexico, Moreno won a 2/3 majority in both houses of Congress, are bringing them up to the constitutional level. They're putting them into the Constitution so that no future conservative government can take them away. They're enshrining them as rights, not just programs, but rights. So I think that discourse is important, right? You have a right to, education and scholarships, and stay in school scholarships. You have a right to healthcare. You have a right to housing. The Sheinbaum government now is setting up a program to build a million units of public housing, where workers can rent these units at a social rent that is no more than 30% of their salary. And it's a rent to buy, where after 10 years of renting, what you've paid in rent can then go towards the price of the house. Because it's not throwing them to the wolves of the market, but it's going to be housing built by the Public Housing Authority. So you can set up something like this. Wow, well, that's a big difference. Because Mexico, like the U.S., has a real housing problem and has rising rents, and it has very expensive housing costs in a number of places. So I think that's it too. The idea that they're rights, they're not temporary programs, and that we're not going to be beholden to the market. Remember, I think Kamala's housing program was all going through private builders. So when you go through private builders, you can't set up, a rent-to-buy program with social rents and lower discounted rents for first-time renters and students who are, just coming out of school. All the things you can do if you harness the power of the public sector.
Right. And that's interesting. And I think that I agree with that. I do think that there, we have to acknowledge some of the things that Biden accomplished, but it was not, even to the extent that there were things accomplished, they were not transformative in the way that it seems the Moreno's program has been for working class people in Mexico. And so, do you think that that what has been happening kind of since 2018 in Mexico, do you think that this is equivalent to like the New Deal era in the United States? Is there a similar realignment and restructuring of power in favor of working people, similar to what we experienced during the New Deal under FDR?
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison. And to be fair, too, I mean, Mexico was starting from a very low bar in some of these areas, and the minimum wage was just absurdly low. So it went up 100%, but it's still too low. But it was still something that people felt compared to what it was. And then, the knock-on effects that it had on other wages. And so even according to, it was the World Bank, I think it was, 9 million people were lifted out of poverty in this administration. And that was, in the face of COVID. So that's no small thing. When you see your wages are going up, people are, coming out of poverty. You see, infrastructure projects that are happening, like the new airport in Mexico City. Mexico is rebuilding its train network. You see things like that. You say, oh, okay, all right. They're not throwing away, my tax money. They're using it for productive purposes. I think the New Deal analogy is yeah. I think it's a very similar situation. The New Deal arose out of the Great Depression, of course, in the U.S., and Mexico wasn't going through a Great Depression as such, but it was going through, a chronic period of low growth, neoliberal policies, a real rotten, corrupt, kleptocratic elite that thought that they owned the place. Part of the whole AMLO phenomenon that got them so angry was not just that he was, instituting progressive policies, but that he wasn't one of us, in quotes, wasn't one of them. He came from another social class. He came from another state. He came from another region. He talks in a very colorful way with very colorful phrases, folksy, not the polished technocratic discourse of decades before, of people who mostly had been, educated in elite U.S. universities and came back to apply that elite U.S. university model to Mexico with very poor results. So it was a breaking with a lot of things there. And I think, the New Deal analogy, yes, right? You have, in FDR's case, it was, it wasn't creating a new party like Morena, but it was really doing something very different with the Democratic Party than the way the party had existed before him. In the case of Mexico, it realized at this juncture, a new party was necessary. But I think you're seeing a building out of a welfare state with, very interesting parallels to the New Deal in the U.S. Yes.
And so, the continuation of these popular periods in society is always a very difficult thing. We saw, the New Deal was relatively, stable, and we do still have a lot of pieces of the New Deal left. But ultimately, there was, we went through kind of a period of reaction in the 80s with Reagan. But in Latin and South America, it seems like there's an even deeper problem with maintaining and continuing these legacies. After when Lula left office in Brazil, there was kind of a collapse of his party and his movement. With Evo Morales in Bolivia, we've seen a similar dynamic. The MAS is really in disarray at this time, and it's unclear what the future is going to be like in Bolivia, even after these really stunning periods of economic expansion and shifting power towards working people. And this is another case where it seems like Mexico is bucking the trend, right? Not only did Sheinbaum succeed AMLO, Dilma Rousseff succeeded Lula, but it was with a significantly lower vote share, and then ultimately, she was ousted. Sheinbaum won with a higher vote share than AMLO did. So it seems like not only are we not looking at a period of successful reaction or counter-revolution yet, but we're seeing the successes grow and build on itself. And so why do you think that is? And what was Sheinbaum's program during the election? Was it running explicitly on just a continuation of AMLO, or were there additional things that she said that we are going to go further and be, potentially even more radical in my administration?
Sure. It's interesting that López Obrador kind of, with a gleam in his eye in his final days, he said, you think I was left. He said, just watch out. I'm kind of bougie compared to Sheinbaum. Watch out. She's tough. She's tough.
Mm-hmm.
And she's proven to be that in her first month in office. She's got a real no-nonsense demeanor. She's continued with the morning press conferences, and people try to trip her up, and she's just been very good at shutting them down. People have been trying to create all kinds of hysteria about the Trump election, and that, Trump is going to treat Sheinbaum so badly, and Trump is going to come after Mexico and whatever else. She's been like, take it easy. Take it easy. We'll deal with this. We'll deal with this when it comes. So with regards to Sheinbaum, she very specifically ran on continuing AMLO's legacy. She didn't run away from AMLO like people, the kind of the high-priced consultant class would try to have her do, as if she were, a detergent or a box of cereal. You have to, you have to have your own brand. She's like, no, this is a movement. This is a party movement. This is a movement party. Very proud of López Obrador, and we're going to continue a lot of the programs that I mentioned here. But there's going to be a new element she calls the second floor of the transformation, right? The first floor and now the second floor. And that one of them I mentioned was the 1 million units of public housing. Another one is lowering the pension age for women, this new universal pension from 65 down to 60, because women in Mexico and all over the world, a lot of times, are the primary caregivers for children and for aged relatives, and for a whole variety of reasons, a lot of times don't have the opportunity to build up their own retirement savings. So she said the retirement age for women should go down to 60. There's a whole new accent on women's issues. Mexico actually just passed its own version of the Equal Rights Amendment on Friday, the ERA, enshrining gender equality into the Constitution. That's a big one. She also wants to boost investment into science and technology, wants Mexico to design its own electric car, put a satellite into space. Traditionally, Latin America was simply seen as an exporter of raw materials to the global north. And the effort of Sheinbaum and governments like this is to say, we have our own materials and they're ours, and we should be able to have a whole production capacity with them, right? And not just be an exporter of low-wage labor or maquiladora workers, which are, just assembly workers, but, really use, for example, Mexico's got lithium, which it nationalized a few years ago. Use that lithium for its own, productive chain and its own productive capacity. So that's a lot of what Sheinbaum wants to do there with regards to the pension, with regards to housing, with regards to making those stay-in-school scholarships universal. That anyone in public school who stays in school will get a scholarship for, books, materials, uniforms, supplies, so you can have breakfast, all of these things that will try to help keep kids in school. So there's some exciting stuff coming down the pike. And I think your point is really well taken, though. Morena just won a smashing victory, but that's no time for it to rest on its laurels, because there are always forces that would try to stymie this, right? And we saw this, as you mentioned, in Brazil. We see the problem now in Bolivia, right? These Ecuador, these well-funded campaigns of lawfare, which is the attempt to use the judicial branch to, stop popular movements, stop people's movements in their tracks, right? We need to look no farther than the U.S. and know how a conservative court can, really throw a wrench into the works. And actually, one of AMLO's last measures was a judicial reform, providing for the direct election of judges. Mexico has a very corrupt and a very conservative judicial system, and they're now going to be, including the Supreme Court, going to be elected by popular vote. And the hue and cry about this, and it's against democracy and it's against the separation of powers. And, it's like a lot of states in the U.S. elect judges.
Right. Yes, like Alabama, one of the most conservative states in the country. Our state Supreme Court is popularly elected. So as we're rounding out, just for my own edification, I'm curious what your read is on the role that unions play in Mexico society, in Mexico generally, and the Morena coalition specifically, because I've been aware of, like you mentioned earlier, the Mexican labor movement is primarily a movement of company unions. And for people that don't know what a company union is, that just means that a union that is dominated by the company. It's, it is what it sounds like. And so not a real independent labor union. That is the Mexican labor movement is just really plagued by this. And so how are these company unions responding to Morena, and to what extent there is a burgeoning independent labor movement in Mexico, and to what are Morena, specifically trying to make paths for these independent unions to kind of take over these company unions or beat back the company unions? Or are they playing, or is Morena being more kind of neutral in the fight between these two ostensibly union forces? Unpack that for us.
Good question. It's so important we're talking about this. Like you said, as I mentioned earlier, the sad history of unionism in Mexico has to do with its co-opting by the one-party state of the PRI for 70 years. So unions were totally co-opted into that umbrella, which is sad and ironic, because actually the Mexican Revolution, the famous Mexican Revolution of 1910, was sparked by labor struggle, by the famous miners' strike in Cananea, Sonora, right, back in 1906. which sparked the first major revolution of the 20th century. And then you had the expropriation of Mexico's oil industry in 1938, also based on labor issues, because multinational oil companies refused to settle with striking workers, despite an arbitration board ruling. And so that gave then President Cárdenas the pretext to expropriate the industry. So labor issues have been so important in Mexico history for throughout the 20th century. It was really tragic that it went through the period of co-opting, and it's just now emerging from that. You still see a situation where 80, maybe even up to more percent of unions in Mexico are company unions. They're company unions. They're in the pockets of employers.
Right.
Now, AMLO's union reform made some very important steps to that. It provided for secret ballot elections, because a lot of times before you just have the raising of hands on the shop floor. So of course you could point out people, or just kind of very pro forma elections that, the results were, very obvious from beforehand who was going to win. And so the union reform set up secret ballot elections and also required that all contracts be negotiated within 4 or 5 years. And that a lot of those contracts are up now because the union reform is about 4 or 5 years old. So the union reform is also going to set up a whole new system of labor boards, basically labor courts. And that's been slow to happen. And so you've gotten to the situation where some of these contracts have come up, but they haven't been replaced by something else. And the courts have been slow to get started. And, it's been a slower process than a lot of people would have liked. Despite that, there have been some notable independent union victories. I mentioned one, which is the 3220 movement in Matamoros. There have also been some important victories in auto plants, the Cintia victory in Guanajuato in 2022, the independent victory of SNITIS, the Cintis independent union in Matamoros in Reynosa. That was like the trifectory of big wins a couple of years ago. So you've seen some important wins. Just the problem for independent unionism is they've got so much against them. They've got like in the U.S., they've got so much against them with regards to money, against them with regards to the press, with regards to just they create all kinds of difficulties for unions to organize. Direct intimidation, direct physical intimidation at times. So this is a place where a lot of work needs to happen, and Morena hasn't done enough. That would be my critique of this in this case. Morena really hasn't done enough. It's been neutral on it. The union bill was good, but what you don't see is kind of rank and file members of Morena getting really going heart and soul into the union organizing process. It's been kind of hands off. Now, one can understand that in the sense of they don't want to repeat the co-opting of unions that happened in the days of the PRI, which is very recent history in Mexico, and people are very well aware of that they don't want parties co-opting unions. But that said, it's such an uphill struggle for independent unions to win, even in the new conditions, that, where's the party here? So I think that's something they still have to work out. Morena, it's not like the UK Labour Party by any means, where unions have their vote and, dues. It's nowhere near that kind of relationship where the dues go to the party and they have their block vote in the convention and all that. Nothing like that. Nothing like that at all. Now, I'm not saying they have to adopt a model that's that close, but I would like to see Morena take more interest in union matters than they've shown so far.
Right. Well, maybe they will. They've got 6 years under Sheinbaum, so we'll see how it goes, and we'll try to have you back on during this time to let us know how things are going. I really appreciate your time. Kurt Hackbarth, freelance journalist in Mexico. Thanks for your time. Where can folks find your work?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one other thing that I was just thinking about with regards to the whole union issue. Just make a call for the best of the U.S. union tradition, which is international solidarity. I think sometimes we can all slip into this discourse of, they're taking our jobs in Mexico, as if Mexican workers wanted to take the jobs of U.S. workers. It's actually workers on both sides of these policies. Mexican workers aren't trying to take away your jobs in the U.S. They're suffering as well, and under even worse conditions in cases. So how can there be solidarity between unions to help people on both sides, against, what can often be very, very abusive employers, international employers. So so I'm in Jacobin magazine. I write monthly on Mexico in Jacobin. You can find my work there. A couple of articles that I'll highlight. One of them is a recent one that was called Mexico's Lessons for the International Left. And I go into more detail of some of what we talked about here. And also, if you're interested more in the union aspect, I came out with a piece a couple of years ago. It's called "In Mexico, Workers Are Struggling for Independent Unionism." And that goes into more detail about some of what I couldn't mention here. So I recommend those two pieces. And we also have a podcast in English. It's called Soberanía, which is the Mexican word for sovereignty, Soberanía, the Mexican Politics Podcast. And we're on YouTube. We're on Spotify and Apple Podcast. And we're regular guests over there at Left Reckoning, so you'll see us back over there, I'm sure, fairly soon. But check us out at the podcast. We come on weekly with a great Mexican journalist colleague, Jose Luis Granado Ceja. The podcast is called Soberanía, Soberania. Check us out. Give us a like. Give us a subscription. That always gives us a boost. And it helps, get some of the stuff out in English, because a lot of the English language, media about Mexico is just terrible. It's really bad. Really, really bad. So anything you can do to help get out, the other story of why you have a party that can win elections and also be helping people at the same time, I think it'd be great to get that message out there.
Yep. And I do want to hold up, you mentioned the importance of international solidarity, particularly from the United States, which is, the author of so much suffering, particularly as you mentioned in Latin and South America. The UAW has been doing a really good job. I think actually, let me ask you that question. I think the UAW has been doing a good job under Sean Fain with international solidarity. They were a big reason that some of the independent Mexican unionists came to labor notes and gave one of the, closing plenary speeches, I think. It was either closing or opening, and this independent Mexican unionist got standing ovation from American unionists, and it was really exciting to hear that. But what is your assessment, if you have time? I know that we're running a little long, but what is your assessment, if you have time, of the UAW's kind of new stance towards Mexican unions?
Yeah, I think it's been good. And I remember what you said about when the Mexican unionists there, and the whole thing with labor notes. But I think there's more to do, because I think there's sometimes kind of a reflexive reaction to just say, it's just U.S. workers here, or just U.S. Canada, or whatever else. And you see efforts to try to play one country off each other. You just dug forward there, and Canada was trying to say, we're going to cut Mexico out of the, the free trade agreement because it's up for revision in 2026. They always try to find these ways to undercut international solidarity. So I just say, more of it, please. And, I think one of the interesting things is that rapid response mechanism, I'm not a great fan of the free trade agreement at all, but that rapid response mechanism has helped set off some of these independent cases that we mentioned, like Cintia and Cintas in Guanajuato, and Matamoros and Reynosa. So that's something they may very well try to get rid of down the line when they try to revise it. So let's try to just keep it going, I'd say.
Absolutely. All right. Kurt Hackbarth, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
The phone number is 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857. Had at least one person in the chat saying they were going to call in, so we will take your call as soon as you call in, just about. Again, that phone number is 844-899-TVLR. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Like the stream if you haven't yet. Let's go to this other clip. We've got another clip here. This one from CNBC, one of those business news channels, about and it's another clip where they're talking about some of what is to come, the impending firing, almost certain firing of Lena Khan from the FTC, despite J.D. Vance ostensibly being a fan. But let's take a look at this clip here from CNBC.
It's lowered. But I come back, Carl, I'm going to see Live Nation today at the new Paramount in Brooklyn. Frank will not be there, unfortunately.
It's a great hall. You're going to love it.
Yeah, it is a great hall. But I would tell you that there's an example of Live Nation's a very clear example of what I'm talking about. There had been a really serious effort made at the beginning of this year to separate Ticketmaster from Live Nation, which really hurt their earnings. And what they talked about on the call was, hey, look, that may be done. We're going to have a more reasonable antitrust department. A more reasonable antitrust department is a PE multiplier, because you're not going to get blindsided.
Pause it. PE, private equity multiplier. I mean, we're talking about here these business types. You know, I mean, remember, CNBC is not NBC. It's not ABC. It's not, you know, these are, I mean, all of these companies, all of these news stations are corporate outlets, but CNBC is specifically geared towards a smaller viewership of high wealth individuals, of business owners, of elites, right? That is their audience. And so they're talking here about how the situation for private equity under a Trump FTC is going to be multiplicatively better. You know, and that doesn't bode well for folks like me. You know, in this context, we're talking about Live Nation. Folks like me who want to be able to go to a concert for a reasonable price on the weekends, right? Or for folks like Adam who work for these concert venues and want to be able to make a reasonable wage. Right? I mean, these are the and both of us are getting screwed. The people who put on these shows are getting screwed by these corporate, in their cases, monopsonies. There's your word of the week, folks. Monopsony. Monopsony is like the reverse of monopoly. It's where there is only one buyer for a good, right? And so typically we talk of monopsony, or a lot of times in terms of labor. So if there is only one employer, then they have more power over, they have more leverage over the people who do the labor. Monopoly is where there's only one seller, and so you have to basically pay their price. But somebody in the chat, Bill, said it hurts artists too. Yes, exactly. I mean, it hurts everybody. It's not good that we have these people like the folks at the top of Live Nation who just make money on, who siphon value that is created by people like Adam who put on the shows, by people like the artists who do the art and do the singing and the performances and things that make people like me want to spend money on the shows. I mean, it hurts all three of these interested parties. The only people that these Live Nation type monopolies benefit is the folks at the top who are not producing any value. They are making money because they have money, right? It's bad. It's bad, and it's sad because Lena Khan, under the Biden FTC, was attacking these institutions, was trying to make progress towards breaking them up. And so it's, you know, it's very sad. Like, you know, but I don't know. Let's continue.
You're not going to have an alphabet which must be broken up. You're not going to have a Live Nation which must be broken up. Instead, what you have is kind of business as usual. If antitrust doesn't like it, they call you, maybe work something out. And that's actually what they said on the comp score. I can't wait to go there and see Michael Rapino, because it's saying, listen, the rule of reason is back. The rule of reason.
The rule of reason. These are business people. These business people talking about the rule of reason is back. It's been unreasonable that we have not been able to steal the value that's been created by the artists and the workers that actually make the shows happen. It's unreasonable that we have been, prosecuted for anti-competitive, illegal practices. That's unreasonable. Now we're going to be back to a reasonable environment where I can break the law with impunity and nobody cares, and I can just call somebody and smooth everything over with a conversation. Let's continue.
It's interesting because it wasn't the quarter wasn't perfect. Sales did miss at all three divisions, and yet the dynamic you're describing results in what we got today.
Look, you split that company up, and you have a company that doesn't do as well, and Yeah, Dave, one of the things that I think that we all have to recognize is not do as well versus well is part of what was going on with the administration's antitrust department, which is that we're not going to have these companies do as well. We don't want them to do as well. We want them to break up, and not necessarily we want monopolists to be punished. I think there was a sense of retribution and a sense of moral judgment against the monopolists. Which
okay, pause it. Like, this is just so difficult for me to like grasp, as like this guy is totally bumfuddled that somebody would morally judge a monopolist. Like, he's saying this as if it is a neutral term, right? Monopoly, like, yeah, just by virtue, if you were a monopolist without doing anything bad, like, it would be bad to be a monopolist. Like, you should be morally judged just simply for the fact that you are a monopolist, like, with nothing else happening. You can be a benevolent dictator, but it is still morally wrong that you are a dictator, right? I mean, we can look back through the history of civilizations and say that this king was better than that king, but it was still a moral disgrace that there were kings, right? And they were bad for having been kings, right? And so it is bad to be a monopolist. Point blank, end of discussion. But also, in addition to being monopolists, these people like Live Nation are exploiting all of the other parties in this because they can. And they're doing these anti-competitive practices because they can and because they have the power. And so, like, there's double reason to morally judge them. I am bamboozled. I am bewildered. I don't know. It's bonkers. It's bonkers. Okay, let's continue.
If you read what the Justice Department said about it, they were adamant. Look, this is
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So there wasn't that much more of the clip left. But yeah, it's just so. It's like it really is. It really is wild. And so these people are like really excited about monopolists not being judged anymore. And that's what we can expect. And hopefully, I did see that Lena Khan has been making a play with J.D. Vance, trying to be publicly friendly with J.D. Vance. And I hope she wins. And look, if they retain Lena Khan, I will come out and do a mea culpa on this specific issue on stream. And I'll be excited about it, right? If they come out and Trump says we are retaining Lena Khan at the FTC, I will be excited about it, and I will say Trump did a good thing here. And I'll also say that antitrust is among all of the things that I'm concerned about with the Trump administration. Antitrust is one of the places where I do think there is a possibility that they do not screw up royally. Because there were some cases that the Trump administration in the first administration did under the Department of Justice Antitrust Division. If I'm remembering this correctly, I believe this is the case, that the Biden administration carried over. And so there has been something of a and that was related to like farmers, if I'm remembering correctly. And so, hopefully they retain Lena Khan, and I'll do a big thing about it, and I'll be excited about it. But that's not my anticipation, and that is not what these business people are anticipating. These business people are anticipating that Lena Khan is gone, and they get to do whatever they want. So there you go. We've got two callers. Oh, we have. How do you even call in anonymously? I didn't even know that you could do that. But let's bring on an anonymous caller. I don't even know how they did that. But anonymous caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from? Or what's your anonymous name? And yeah.
Okay, interesting. All right, well, then I'll go by Mark. I'm in Florida because I know you love Florida, so we'll go with that. All right.
There we go. Mark, I do love Florida. I was just in Florida recently. I went to Disney on vacation. My first time ever having been in Florida, or having ever been in Florida, yes, but also first time ever having gone to Disney. And it was during the longshore strike, and I was able to make a trip out to the port of Tampa. to walk the picket line with some of my longshore sisters and brothers. So I was happy to be able to do that because I would not have been able to be on their picket line if I hadn't been on vacation in Florida because I live a long way from a port. So so it was good timing. So yes, I do love Florida, and I had a good time at Disney World and walking the picket line with my longshore sisters and brothers out at Tampa. So yeah, Mark from Florida, what's on your mind?
Well, I appreciate that you're there for, workers. However, I'm sorry to hear that you went to Disney World. That's not a good reputation company right now with people being arrested for certain things I shouldn't say on the online world. And Universal Studios is better, just FYI. Better age.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you're referring to. But I was amazed at the whatever else. I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, but just on the worker thing again, I was really amazed at the how well everything was put together at Disney World. Like all the construction, everything was like really beautiful. It was really made really well. And then also the staff, like the service staff, were always like really friendly. They at least seemed like they were happy to be there. And that struck me like at the time being there, but it struck me even more when I went to Busch Gardens and like the staff was not happy to be there, and it made the experience not as good. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, what do you think of the certain workers that are men dressing up as women, and then they got full beards on, but they're wearing a full princess outfit as an employee? What do you think of that?
I don't think it bothers me. I don't care what people wear.
Really? So if you're bringing your daughter there and there's a man with a beard wearing a princess outfit, and you're like, "Hey, this is a princess," and your daughter's like, "That's a man," what would you say?
What? Well, I don't typically interact with strangers. Like, what is the or I don't interact that much with strangers. Like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? What is the what situation?
Employee in Disney World.
Of as an employee at Disney World?
Several Disney. Yeah, like you was
under what circumstances?
To the next exhibit.
Yeah, well that doesn't happen, right? Like I know people. I know like cisgender women that are not able to, like, they have very, like, you got to be a very specific kind of person to be one of their like Disney princess types, right? And so, like, I'm not sure what you're talking about, actually.
Oh, well, yeah, I was just referring to the pedos at Disney World, the ones that are being arrested, and there's a lot of men dressing as women, and they're just, finding ways to get into a workforce at Disney World, but. Yeah, I just had to comment that you mentioned Disney World. That's what popped in my head when you mentioned Disney World. And then, yeah, just calling in general. Kind of funny, quirky geek girl was talking about politicians shouldn't hold stocks. Yeah, sure. But they also have to then target their family and audit the whole family structure to it as well. Nancy Pelosi is a great example of that. So
yes, she is.
Politicians, definitely.
Yeah, she absolutely is, and she's a great. And she was one of the obstacles to getting it blocked. I think like her in the House and like Tuberville, my senator in the Senate, were some of the chief obstacles of that. And Tuberville in particular was very frustrating to me because his argument against it was that if you don't allow, and I kid you not, like go and look it up, what he said about this stock trading ban. He said, if you don't allow people to buy stocks, then you're going to prohibit successful people from becoming Congress folks because they won't want to do it because they won't be able to make enough money on it. And it's crazy having that salary as a senator. And then also Tommy Tuberville got paid $5 million from the Alabama taxpayer to quit as the Auburn head football coach. And on top of that $5 million that he got from the taxpayer to quit, he gets $67,000 annually from his pension, again, paid by taxpayers in the state of Alabama. And so for him to talk about like not making enough money was really frustrating to me. He gets more in just his pension than the median Alabama worker.
Yep, cup to the bone. And it's funny, I just saw quirky geek girl right here. Overall, it was arrested 160 people. You're talking about 160 pedos working at Disney. That's bad. I mean, that's a bad environment for your kids. I mean, I can't believe you're not aware of this and you're not concerned to bring, let's pretend, your daughter to Disney World, and then you run into an employee, full beard, I'm a man, but then wearing a princess outfit, and your daughter's clearly like, hey, what is that, Daddy? Is that a man? And you're like, yeah, it's a man. Like, oh boy, yeah, that's bad.
I looked up 160 Disney employee, arrested, and what I found was that there was one Disney employee among 160 arrested for like sex trafficking.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Still really bad.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's bad. Like, you're gonna have bad. Like, I mean, preachers do this stuff, right? I mean, so like, there's not anything, as far as I can tell, like a problem among Disney employees, specifically. There was a Disney employee among 160 arrested, which is like, that's crazy. Like, this is a crazy story, but it was not even, this guy does not even seem to have been any sort of like LGBT, like, it just seems like this was just a man that was the Disney employee. So like, I think it's very, I think it's indicative of like, I don't know, your media diet that's kind of like what you thought of. There was a man, it seems to me, look, I mean, I'm literally looking at this right now. So, you can email me if something else comes up, right? But I haven't followed this story. But it seems to me that what we have here is that there is one cisgender man who was a lifeguard at Disney among 160 arrested for human trafficking charges. And you're talking about transgender folks that work at Disney. And these are two completely unrelated things that have somehow become like melded in your mind. Like, does that not seem weird to you?
Well, it seems weird to me as a man in a dress with young children in a princess outfit.
This guy,
I mean,
was this cisgender,
in a dress.
Was this apparently cisgender employee at Disney, was he wearing a dress?
In this particular incident? No, I'm just saying in general, like if you look it up, man in dress at Disney World, you'll see plenty of examples of that and the concern of Disney World as a whole and what they're promoting. But I don't want to get too...
Yeah, is that what you wanted to call about?
Disney World. I'm just throwing a little caution flag. No, not really.
Okay.
Yeah,
what do you want to call it?
Working from home. Oh, just kind of like a broad range of things. I mean, you seem very Democrat-leaning. You don't want to promote anything Republican, I can tell. You want to target Vivek and Tucker Carlson. Great people, by the way. And it's just interesting takes you have. You keep bringing on Jim Craner. He's bad with the stock market. He's usually wrong on his calls. And people work from home. I mean, statistically, you could Google it, sure. You could maybe find some stats saying they're more productive. I don't buy for 1 second. I really don't. I got a couple neighbors who work from home. They tell me personally, and I don't know that many people who work from home. So my statistics versus the world, who knows? But I just kind of doubt people who work from home work harder than people who work in person. And I encourage people to work in person more than online or at home. And same with schooling as well. We saw with the pandemic how kids are less physically, active, and they're just all behind as well, because of the lockdowns and doing remote learning. We should work in person, definitely.
Okay, so this is the topic.
Just kind of overall.
Yeah, this is the topic. We'll have to wrap on this topic. You can stay on for just a little bit longer, but I do have another caller on the line, and we need to wrap here soon. But and then you said you had a wide range of topics. Feel free to call back in. We're live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Central Time. The phone number is the same. But on the work from home thing, like, I don't know what you mean when you say work harder from home. Like, I don't work harder when I work from home, but I produce as much. Like, when I'm working harder, like, what does that even mean? Are you more exhausted at the end of the day? Are you more tired at the end of the day? Like, I'm more tired at the end of the day when I go into the office, but I am not less productive when I work from home. That is my own personal experience working from home. I'm not less productive. And in fact, actually, my most recent performance evaluation was the highest that I have ever gotten. And I was primarily working from home. I was like 3 days a week at home, 2 days a week in the office. The last performance evaluation that I got when I was working for the federal government. I have a different job now. And so So I don't know what it means when your neighbors say, am I working harder from home? If somebody asked me, do you work harder from home? I would probably say no. I work the same or maybe less hard, but I get the same amount of work done, and that is reflected in my performance evaluations by the way that my management views my work product. And that's also, and my anecdotal experience is also matched by the evidence. Like, I'm not, I challenge you to find any study that shows that people are generally less productive when they work from home, and you won't be able to find it. And also, when you're listening to these people try to attack folks who work from home, try to listen for evidence that they provide for it, right? Because they don't. They just point to the way these kind of common sense, perhaps, things, these intuitions, but they don't actually say Social Security administrators do less cases when they're at home, because that evidence doesn't exist. And I posit my hypothesis for the reason as to why they don't have this evidence is that it doesn't exist, because the evidence seems to me, according to the Government Accountability Office, according to these other to like academic institutions who have studied this, that work from home is either like does not have an impact on productivity or makes people more productive. And so, because it is so beneficial for workers, I support workers being able to get work from home if their job can be done that way, right? And obviously, also one more thing that I remembered: doing a job is also different than like school, right? Obviously, I think we can all understand, and the data has shown, I think that like at-home learning was detrimental for children, and because like the school is at least as much about the socialization and the like learning how to move through the world. It's at least as much about that as it is about like learning that 2 + 2 is 4, right? And so we can understand how doing that in isolation is going to be detrimental in a way that working from home as an adult is not.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of jobs that require you work in person, so that's I think that's the obvious, versus how many jobs there are remotely. And I think we can both admit that, Fauci was wrong. Kids in school was more harmful than sending the kids with COVID.
I think that we did the lockdowns for too long for schools. Probably. Yeah. So I don't know specifically about what claim that you're referring to Fauci making, but I do think that, well, in some places, I mean, in Alabama, it was very, very quick that children were back in schools. And so and I imagine in Florida, it's the same way. So it's kind of strange that we're like 4 years out now and people are kind of, that's still part of it. But yeah, I think we can generally agree that it's important for kids to be in schools and particularly for long periods of time we shouldn't do that.
Well,
again, so.
And we'll remember it was the red states that it was the red states that wanted to open up sooner, and they did do it, and it was the blue states that didn't. And the Department of Education is corrupt. They got their money. They got the federal ESSER funds that school got from states to get COVID relief money, millions of dollars per district. And typically they only get like maybe $300K per district. No, we're talking $3 million. I've been at the school board meetings. I've seen their reports, the financials, and it's called ESSER fund. You can look it up, and that's what they receive for COVID relief money. So it was for the money, not the best interest of the children.
I'm not sure what you're talking. I didn't. I have to be honest. I did not follow the education stuff that closely. But I do recall having there were a lot of problems with the distribution of those funds and how they were either not utilized or not utilized for what they were what they should have been utilized, like at the local level. So yeah, there were definitely some problems there. But Mark, appreciate the call. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hope you call back. All right. We got another caller. This caller from a 516 area code. 516 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Jacob, how you doing?
Jacob.
Name is Roger. No. I said Jacob, how you doing?
My
name is Roger. I'm calling from New York.
Roger from New York. Sorry. Roger, not Jacob from New York. What's on your mind?
So I was hoping you were going to ask Dan my question when he was on that I live chatted, but it seems he has a loyal constituency. I would say to him, not every fight has to be done at the federal level. There's more than enough that he can get done in Nebraska. Nebraska is one of 17 states that allows you to run citizen-led initiative amendment measures to appear on the ballot that the Nebraskans, can ratify into the Nebraska Constitution. He can take that constituency of his, start a petition drive, and run those worker-friendly amendment measures to qualify to be on the 2026 ballot. Why go through the middleman politician hoping on a wish and a prayer that they will do it for you when you have direct democracy at home where you could do it yourself? Now, that's the first thing I wanted to say. I'd like to know if you have any comments on that.
Oh, I mean, I don't think it's an either or, but I do think that the citizen initiatives that they have in Nebraska is really important and really good, and I'm sure that that's part of the conversation. I apologize for not seeing that comment while he was on the question that you had, but I'm sure that that's part of the conversation, and I would hope that it is part of the conversation. But I do think that holding that getting those seats of power and having people that are friendly to working folks, holding them so, like, if for no other reason, so that anti-worker politicians cannot stop these citizen-led initiatives from going forward. I mean, there was one somewhere, I think it was Florida, but I can't. But they passed a higher minimum wage, and the legislature either killed it or amended it or made it, like really kind of messed it up, right? Even though the populace voted for it, the legislature kind of got in the way of it, right? And so I think that both are important. That it's a really cool thing that they have that in Nebraska. They should utilize it. I hope that Dan is having these conversations and that they're making plans to utilize it. But it's also important to have people in power that are, at the very least, not going to stop the citizens when they do these things, and also support the citizens and have a broader program. Yeah.
It might have not been Florida. The only reason why I say that is because usually when you see that type of stuff, it's when they push it as a citizen initiative law, which means that if you push, I always tell people in these citizen ballot initiative states, if you're going to run something that threatens power, don't run it as a law, run it as an amendment. Because if you run it as a law, then the legislature can repeal or change it around without having to ask you first, unlike if it were an amendment, okay? Florida only gives voters the power to amend. They don't, they can give themselves through running an initiative amendment to give themselves the ability to repeal and pass laws as well. But as it is right now, if it was Florida, then they would have had to have ask the voters first by putting a legislative initiative amendment on the ballot. But it might have been something else. But I understand it's always a fight regardless. But I'm just saying, usually what you can get done, you want to get done at the federal level, you can get it done at the state level as well. You know what I'm saying? It's through direct democracy. Now, speaking of direct democracy, of which, something else I would like for all of us who are for workers to consider. Unions are more of a reform to a capitalist system than they are getting rid of the capitalist system. As long as we have the dynamic of the boss's interests separate from workers' interests, we will always be in this eternal fight to make sure that workers do not get taken advantage of. The only way that we can actually have, at least in the private sector, that workers win this war is workers have to own and run the economy. And the only way that could happen is if we abolish corporations, especially shareholder owned, and instead replace them with stakeholder cooperatively owned by workers, aka worker cooperatives. When the workers own the manufacturing, distribution, supply chain, and the means of production, one, you never have to strike again. Why? Because the workers are the owners. Two, you have a guaranteed American-made manufacturing base. I mean, what worker cooperative is going to vote to move the manufacturing plant outside of their community, state, and country? Three, it ensures high-quality products and service due to the fact that the workers' morale will be boosted because they would have a vested interest through their sense of ownership to make sure it's done right. Four, they would not vote to replace their jobs with automation, or if they do, they would vote to make sure there is another position that is created for the human being. Five, it's self-regulating since the factory is located within the community. So they're going to make sure that they do not put their community at risk, not their natural environment, nor their natural environment in regards to air, water, and soil quality. There would be no cover-ups because it's part of the community. Six, it's guaranteed workplace safety. They're not going to force themselves to work in unsafe conditions without self-correction first. Seven, it provides a constant, stable, and reliable tax base for the community and the state. They're not just going to pack up and leave because they don't want to pay taxes. Eight, service is more emphasized than greed, so an anti-inflationary practice is already intertwined within it. Nine, it protects from high unemployment. And 10, workers are less likely to take the company public for a payday for the simple fact that it is more than just a job, but part of their culture and way of life. In case you didn't know, I don't know if you read that Forbes article that they said that if Apple was a worker cooperative, each worker owner would get paid $403,000 a year. So that's what I'm saying in regards to unions in the public sector. I think unions should exist in the public sector, but in the private sector, the workers should own the economy through worker cooperatives and build that way.
All right.
I know that was a lot.
No, yeah, Roger from New York. Appreciate your call. We're gonna let you go and wrap up the show, but I agree. I think that yeah, we should absolutely do that. I think that Germany has an interesting model that needs to be expanded, but they have if the workplace has 1,000 workers or more, then they have to have 50% or 40% of the board of directors be elected by the workers, and I think that obviously that's not exactly what you're talking about. That's not direct worker ownership. But yes, I think workers should own the companies that they work for, and the people who do not create any value, who make their money from the value that other people create, should not actually have the ownership. So yeah, there you go. Appreciate everybody calling in. Appreciate everybody calling in and tuning into the show. Don't forget our fundraiser, tvlr.fm/union 2024 is where you can go to donate. And if we're able to meet our goal, I think that we're going to be able to do this whether we meet this goal or not. But this is particularly for making sure that we can start paying Adam here in the new year. So if you think that Adam deserves a day off, you think that he ought to get paid for the work that he does for this program, then maybe donate to the show. tvlr.fm/union 2024. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll see you next week.